Chapter 438. Zhang Yan used the technique to travel. The sword light shone brightly as he traveled for tens of miles. He passed through a swirling cyclone and rode above the sea of clouds until the sky was clear and a bright sun shone down from above. Just now, he was able to see the true appearance of this majestic continent in the clouds. He looked down from the sky and saw that the continent was connected to each other, the mountain ridges were complete and the chi of the earth was flourishing. In the far north, there was a winding mountain ridge that extended into the sky and he couldn't see the end of it. It was like an angry python was swimming and rolling under the veins of the earth. Near the south, the scenery was also beautiful. Deep valleys were shrouded in fog, the trees were lush and old vines were like hanging curtains, the green barrier was like a green screen, it was clear for thousands of years, there were thousands of waterfalls and thousands of streams, the torrents were like roars, rushing very fast. At this moment his sleeve shook slightly and the true spirit of the fish drum came out. It looked up and a divine light shot out from its eyes. It then pointed at a mountain peak in front and said, "Nephew Zhang, this mountain is where the veins of the earth converge, it is also connected to the sky and the earth, it is an excellent place to gather qi." Zhang Yan looked over and saw that the shape of this mountain was different from the others. It was like a turtle looking up at the sky, its head in the clouds, its tail in the water, the mountain path was like a snake, he praised, "It is indeed a good place." He shook his sleeve and rode the wind forward. After walking for the time it took for an incense to burn, he suddenly felt something was wrong. The mountains and rivers were not far away, but it looked like it was right in front of him. However, no matter how he walked, he couldn't get any closer. After thinking for a while, he knew that there was a forbidden formation blocking him. However, this formation wasn't a killing formation, nor was it a maze formation, it wasn't used to trap enemies. If he turned around and left now, he would be able to return safely. Zhang Yan found out from Mountain River Child that when he passed by this place with the previous master, he couldn't enter. Because he was worried that it was the location of someone else's sect, he didn't investigate further. He thought to himself, "It seems like this place has an owner." He was thinking about how to enter, his eyes darting back and forth. Suddenly, his expression changed as he felt that the landscape was somewhat familiar. As soon as he thought of this, he focused his attention and carefully looked at it a few times. His spirit was refreshed as he had already seen through some clues. The power of the mountains and rivers had clearly evolved into eroded runes. Not only that, but the profound meaning contained within was the wondrous method of entering the formation. Zhang Yan couldn't help but sigh inwardly at this extravagance. This continent was so vast, and if one wanted to lay out such a terrain on it, it would be extremely difficult. He had to have the ability to move mountains and topple continents. He secretly calculated in his heart, and after a short while, he understood the changes within, and his heart became firm. He moved in the direction of the formation door. After a few turns, suddenly, the heavens and the earth cleared up, as if he'd passed through some sort of maze, and he discovered that he'd already stepped into this world. His arrival alarmed the owner of this place. A wisp of white smoke flew out from the mountain. When he reached a high place, he dropped down again. Like water pouring down, the water flowed in front of him. On top of it stood a 40-year-old Taoist. His appearance was extremely elegant. A beautiful beard reached his chest, and he wore a magnolia robe. At this moment, he looked at Zhang Yan with a face full of surprise. He bowed and said, "Where did you come from?" Zhang Yan saw him step on the smoke and knew that he was also a core formation cultivator. He bowed and said, "I Zhang Yan, a cultivator from the Donghua continent. I saw this continent floating in the sky, so I came to take a look. I didn't want to disturb your peace." "So it's a cultivator from the Donghua continent," the Taoist exclaimed and said, "I Lu Gua, cultivate in this continent's vast path temple. Outsiders are rarely seen here, and it just so happens that I'm here to collect water today. It's fate that we've met. Why don't you come to my temple and have a seat?" Zhang Yan originally came here to collect the green sun aura, but he couldn't avoid the owner of this place. This suggestion was exactly what he wanted, so he went with the flow and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." After Lu Guo exchanged a few polite words with him, the two of them flew side by side towards the north. After traveling for 2 hours, they saw a Taoist palace built on the peak of a mountain. It had glazed glass and golden tiles, was surrounded by lush trees, and was surrounded by hundreds of birds. The atmosphere was grand. After entering the Taoist palace, Lu Guo led him to the main hall and ordered the servants around to serve tea. However, be it the Taoist children or servants, they were all quite old. They had white hair and were deaf and blind. He called them a few times before they responded and left with their backs hunched. Lu Guo couldn't help but feel a little awkward and said, "I've let you see something embarrassing. There are usually no guests here, and I's busy cultivating. I usually go into seclusion for decades, so I forgot to change a few capable servants in time." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Why don't you teach me a few breathing techniques to prolong my life? That way, I won't have to worry about these things." Cultivators would often go into seclusion for hundreds of years. Thus, the attendants by their side would usually pass down breathing techniques to them to help them live longer. If they were lucky, they would often be accepted as a disciple. Lu Guo sighed and said, "How would you know that the people here are all stupid? It's hard to teach them." After a while, an old man came over with a cup of tea. Zhang Yan picked up the teacup and took a sip. It was fragrant, and after drinking it, there was a surge of spiritual energy that lingered in his chest, not dissipating for a long time. It was a top-notch tea. Lu Guo looked at Zhang Yan and asked curiously, "Just now, I'd like to ask you something. This Kunyu is not a paradise, but it's a secluded place. Ordinary people can't enter because there's a big formation outside. Since you can come here, you must be an expert in formations, right?" Zhang Yan put down the teacup and said with a smile, "I don't know any formations, but there's a hidden heaven and earth inscription in the landscape, which has already pointed out the way. I happen to be an expert in this, so I can come here." Lu Guo exclaimed and stood up excitedly. "You know erosion inscription?" Zhang Yan nodded with a smile and said, "I know a thing or two." Lu Guo showed an impatient expression. He reached into his sleeve and took out a jade talisman. He held it above his head with both hands and said, "Please enlighten me, Taoist." Zhang Yan took it and circulated his spiritual energy. Lines of eroded runes appeared on it. He casually glanced at them and said, "These are 4 lines of an incantation. It seems to be a method to open a formation. It's not difficult to decipher it. Let me and fellow Taoist write it down." He dipped his finger in the tea and wrote it down on the table. Lu Guo's eyes lit up and he looked at it without blinking. At this moment, he seemed to have solved a difficult problem, and there seemed to be an unconcealable excitement between his brows. He shouted, "I see, I see." He suddenly looked up and grabbed Zhang Yan's sleeve. He looked at him eagerly and said, "I'm a Taoist. Why don't you stay with me for a few more days? I still have a lot of questions I want to ask you." Zhang Yan looked embarrassed and said, "I only come here occasionally. I'm afraid." Lu Guo couldn't help but feel anxious and said, "Taoist friend, if you need anything in your cultivation, just tell me. I just hope you can stay for a few more days." Zhang Yan pretended to ponder and finally sighed. He said, "Taoist friend, you are so kind. Then I will stay here for a few days." Lu Guo was overjoyed. He cupped his hands and said, "Good, good. Taoist friend, please stay for a while. I will be back soon." Zhang Yan smiled and returned the gesture. He said, "Taoist friend, please go ahead." After Lu Guo bade farewell to Zhang Yan, he rushed into the inner temple excitedly and followed a tunnel that was dug out from the belly of the mountain to the back of the mountain. He crossed a jade bridge and came to the front of an abode of immortals. He shouted from outside, "Are the 2 senior brothers here? I would like to see you." After a while, the stone door opened and a Taoist child came out. He bowed and said, "Third master, first master and second master invite you inside to talk." Lu Guo tidied his robe and stepped inside. There were 2 pearls and lanterns in the cave. They shone brilliantly like it was daytime. On the east and west sides, there was a strange-looking Taoist sitting cross-legged. The one on the east side, Daoren, had a strange appearance. He was as thin as a stick and his eyelids were drooping, as if he was about to fall asleep. He wore an old white Taoist robe that was wrapped tightly around himself. He had a large cloak on the outside. In front of him was a slightly rusty copper furnace, but there was no incense burning. The person sitting on the west side. He had a short beard and was as fat as a ball. He had very little hair, which was why he only had a small bun on his head. He looked like a little sparrow sitting on his head. He smiled and looked very fat. He said, looking at Junior Marshall Brothers' complexion, "Did something good happen?" Lu Gua nodded and cupped his hands and said, "I would like to let the two Senior Marshall Brothers know that I saw a wandering Taoist outside today." The fat Taoist's expression suddenly tightened. He leaned forward and said in a deep voice, "Where did he come from?" Even Doran's expression changed slightly. He opened his eyes and looked over. Lu Gua said without hesitation, "From what he said, he came from Donghua continent." From Donghua continent? The fat Taoist's expression relaxed a little. He slowly sat up straight and asked, "What is his cultivation level?" Lu Gua said, "Like me, he should be a golden core cultivator." When Doran heard that it was only a golden core cultivator, he closed his eyes and said, "Since he is just passing by, then third brother should treat him well and send him away." The fat Taoist nodded. Then, with a resentful expression, he said, "Third Junior Marshall Brother, how could you let an outsider in? How did eldest Senior Marshall Brother take care of you? Luckily, this person is alone. If he had evil intentions, wouldn't you be inviting a wolf into the house? This will not happen again." Lu Gua panicked and quickly explained, "Brothers, you have wronged me. I did not invite him into the mountain. He broke the array and entered the continent himself." The fat Taoist was shocked and said, "How is that possible? Back then, the three of us received guidance from Uncle Master and spent dozens of years studying the array before we were able to enter the vast Qingdao Palace. How did this person enter this place without any guidance?" Lu Gua hurriedly said, "This is what I wanted to tell you. This person was observing the landscape outside and was guided by that technique. Just now." Hearing this, the two Taoists were visibly moved. Doran's fingers trembled, and his eyes shone brightly. He said, "So, this person can read the erosion runes?" Lu Gua hurriedly nodded and said, "I was afraid that he would deceive me, so I asked him to deduce a few incantations on the spot. After testing them, I found out that this person is indeed skilled in this Tao." Doran was silent for a moment and said, "Where is this person now?" Lu Gua said, "He is still in the hall. If Senior Marshall Brothers allow it, I will arrange for him to stay in the monastery." Doran and the fat Taoist's eyes met. He said, "Third brother, go and make the arrangements first. I will discuss with your second Senior Marshall Brother." Lu Gua bowed and said, "Yes, I will go now." He excitedly turned around and left. Watching him leave, the fat Taoist couldn't help but say, "Senior Marshall Brother, if this person really knows the erosion runes, we must make him stay. We have wasted more than 300 years here for that." The old Taoist stretched out his hand and stopped him from speaking. He pondered for a moment and said, "There's no rush. We still don't know where this person came from. Let me take a look at him for a few days. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 439. For the next few days, every time Lu Gua had a problem, she would go to Zhang Yan for advice. He didn't refuse and deduced everything for her. Although Lu Gua was the only person in the vast Path Temple, Zhang Yan could tell that she wasn't a shrewd person. Sometimes, some words didn't seem to come from her mouth, so he guessed that there must be someone else behind her. He tested her a few times and found that whenever he inadvertently mentioned the tortoise-shaped mountain, Lu Gua would unconsciously reveal a nervous expression. Thus, Zhang Yan thought to himself, the tortoise-shaped mountain must be a very important place to this person. That's why she's so nervous. This is a bit troublesome. Uncle Yugu once said that this mountain is the best place to harvest qi. This place is also very important to me, so I need to think of a way to enter this mountain. However, he didn't know the details of the vast Path Palace, so he couldn't act rashly. But there was no point in wasting time like this. He needed to think of an idea as soon as possible. He thought about it carefully and felt that his knowledge of the eroded writings must be of great use to Lu Gua. Otherwise, she wouldn't be so attentive. He might as well use this point to make a big fuss, retreat in order to advance, and force the person in charge to come out. He would first see the situation of this place and then make plans. After making up his mind, he wasn't in a hurry to act. Instead, he waited patiently for a month under the other party's hospitality. On this day, he felt that the time was right. Taking advantage of the time when Lu Guo finished asking for advice, he said, "I've troubled fellow cultivator for many days. Today I will leave." Lu Guo was caught off guard and said in surprise, "Fellow cultivator, you're leaving just like that?" Zhang Yan said sternly, "That's right. I travel the world in search of opportunities. How can I stay here and not leave?" These days, Lu Guo was used to asking Zhang Yan for advice every day. She felt that there were many things she didn't understand, but as long as he gave her some pointers, she would suddenly see the light. Now that she was in high spirits, how could she bear to let him leave? She tried to persuade him to stay. Unfortunately, no matter what he said, Zhang Yan's face was firm and he insisted on leaving. Lu Guo was so anxious that she was sweating profusely. In the end, she had no choice but to plead. "Since fellow Taoist wants to leave, there's no need to rush. Why don't you stay for one more day and allow I to be your host?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and reluctantly agreed. "Thank you for your hospitality, fellow Taoist Lu. Then I will leave tomorrow." After Lu Guo left, she hurriedly ran to the back of the temple and complained, "Eldest martial brother, that fellow Zhang Yan is leaving. I've said it before, it's just wine and tea. It's just a small favor, how can it make this person stay?" Daoren, however, remained seated and motionless. Instead, he asked, "Junior martial brother, have you had a great harvest these few days?" Lu Guo nodded vigorously and said, "I've learned a lot. If this fellow Taoist Zhang is willing to stay for a few more days, I will definitely be able to break the 9th formation." Daoren nodded and said, "It seems that this person is also a real talent." He paused and asked, "Has he gone anywhere else these few days, or has he inquired about anything?" Lu Guo smiled bitterly and said, "These days, it's always been me asking him for advice. This fellow Taoist has never asked me anything. Apart from that, he doesn't even leave the house. If we're talking about schemes, it's us who ask him for help." The fat Taoist tilted his head and leaned forward. "Senior martial brother, aren't you being too cautious?" Daoren snorted and said, "This matter involves the treasures of the mountain. No matter how cautious we are, it's never too much." Lu Guo became anxious and stomped his feet. "But if this person leaves, where are we going to find someone skilled in eroding runes? Do we have to wait for another 300 years? At that time, I'm afraid we'll all be a pile of bones. Eldest martial brother, you're so muddle-headed." The fat Taoist was displeased and scolded, "Third martial brother, how can you speak to eldest martial brother like that? Do you have any manners?" Lu Guo lowered his head and cupped his fists. "Eldest martial brother, I spoke without thinking. Please forgive me." Daoren waved his hand and didn't seem to mind at all. He smiled and said, "It's fine. Third martial brother is just a little too impatient. However, you're right about one thing. In a few hundred years, we'll all be a pile of bones. What's the point of guarding this treasure mountain? Regardless of whether this person has ulterior motives or not at this point, we can only invite him to give it a try." Lu Guo was overjoyed and said, "Does senior martial brother want to meet this fellow Taoist?" Daoren nodded and smiled. "You can invite him here. I will talk to him personally." Lu Guo was overjoyed. He said, "All right." He turned around and left in a puff of smoke. He was in a hurry to invite Zhang Yan. The fat Taoist was puzzled. He felt that what Lu Guo said was contrary to his senior martial brother's cautious style. He said, "Eldest martial brother, aren't you being too hasty?" Daoren smiled and said, "Don't worry, second junior martial brother. I've sent my disciples out to investigate and they've found out about this person's background. He's not a cultivator from the Middle Pillar state. Not only does he have no foundation here, he also has some grudges with the Lai Xian order. We'll ask him to decipher the eroded runes first. When we break the formation and obtain the treasure, we'll try to capture him and send him to the Lai Xian order. It'll be a great achievement. Isn't this killing two birds with one stone?" The fat Taoist came to a realization. He slapped his knee and said, "Senior Martial Brother, that's a good plan. But why didn't you tell Third Junior Martial Brother?" Daoran shook his head. Third Junior Martial Brother is simple-minded. He doesn't know the ways of the world. If he shows any flaws, it won't be good. It's not too late to talk about it after we're done. The fat Taoist sighed. When we get the treasure, we can return to Pingdong. I'm sure Junior Martial Brother will understand eldest Martial Brother's efforts. After waiting for a while, they heard footsteps. They looked up and saw a tall and handsome young Taoist with bright eyes beside Lugua. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, making him stand out from the crowd. The two of them entered the cave one after the other. Both of them stood up. Daoran cupped his hands and said with a friendly expression, "I'm sure this must be Taoist Zhang Yan. I'm Duan Muli, the temple master of Haoxing Taoist Palace. This is my junior martial brother, Hongan. I was in seclusion a few days ago, so I didn't come out to greet you. Please forgive me for my neglect." Zhang Yan took a look at this person. He saw a strange aura coming from Daoran. He had felt this feeling from Han Guzi before, so he had some guesses in his heart. He cupped his hands and said, "Temple Master Duanmu, you're too kind. Taoist Lu has been very courteous these days. I can't thank you enough for your hospitality." He turned his gaze and bowed to Hong Anong. The latter responded with a smile. Duanmu Li extended his hand and said, "Taoist Zhang, please sit." Zhang Yan sat down. After the four of them sat down, Duanmu Li chuckled. He said, "I invited you here today because I have a request." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said plainly, "I don't deserve it. Temple Master Duanmu's cultivation is far above ice. What request do you have for me?" Duanmu Li saw his unapproachable expression, so he exchanged glances with Hongan and smiled. "Taoist, don't be in a hurry to reject me." He raised his hand and a cloud of smoke floated up from the ground. It rose up and gradually condensed into the shape of a mountain. It was the full appearance of Kuan Island. He pointed at one of the mountains and said, "Taoist, please take a look." Zhang Yan took a look and his eyes narrowed. This mountain was the tortoise-shaped mountain. Duanmu Li looked at the mountain and said emotionally, "I won't hide it from you. In my sect, there was a senior who hid several magic treasures in this mountain. It was rumored that there was even a true weapon. However, in order to sharpen the perseverance of the descendants, he left 36 formations. Any disciple who wants to take the treasures must remove all these formations. This senior was afraid that the descendants would not be skilled enough, so he hid them in the mountains and rivers. He used the art of erosion runes to hide the key to breaking the formations. However, we are shallow and do not understand the meaning. We can only look and sigh." Hearing this, Zhang Yan looked up at Lu Gua and said with a smile that was not a smile, "No wonder Taoist Lu has been asking me for advice these past few days. All of the incantations are hidden formations. So that's how it is." Lu Gua blushed and said awkwardly, "I'm sorry for making you laugh. I'm ashamed." The art of erosion runes was passed down from ancient almighties and contained the truth of heaven and earth. Even sects like the East Flower Continent that had tens of thousands of years of history were not proficient in it. The deduction method was passed down in secret and never leaked to outsiders. The sects of the Central Pillar Continent had risen and fallen several times, and this method had long been lost. Now that they had met Zhang Yan, he was their only hope. Duanmu Li's expression turned solemn. He stood up and solemnly bowed to Zhang Yan. He said, "I and my brothers have a presumptuous request. Since you are proficient in this method, why don't you join forces with us to break this formation? We will reward you generously when the time comes." Hong En and Lu Gua also stood up and bowed to Zhang Yan. An awkward expression appeared on Zhang Yan's face. He said, I am not a disciple of your sect. How can I overstep my authority?" Duanmu Li heaved a heavy sigh and said, "This old Taoist also knows that this request is too abrupt, but this matter is really too important to us senior and junior brothers, and we suffer from no one to help us. We've wasted several hundred years in vain, but we're still unable to enter the door. If fellow Taoist is unwilling to help us, then there's no more hope." When he spoke up to hear, he seemed to have made some sort of resolution, and he said in a low voice, "Then why don't we do this? If we're able to break through this formation, then I'll make the decision. Fellow Taoist can choose any magic treasure from within it and leave. Fellow Taoist Zhang, what do you think?" He stole a glance at Zhang Yan's expression and saw that he seemed to be moved. He was secretly delighted and hurriedly gave his junior brother a look. Hong An stepped forward and bowed. "Fellow Zhang, you are the only one who can help us now. Do you want us to kneel and beg you?" Lu Guo also had a pitiful expression, but he was sincere. He said, "Fellow Zhang." Zhang Yan seemed to be unable to endure the pleading of the three of them. He let out a long sigh and said, "Fine. Since Temple Master Duanmu earnestly requests this matter, I am willing to help. There is only one difficulty. If you three fellow Taoists don't agree, I would rather leave right now." The three of them were overjoyed when they saw him agree. Duanmu Li hurriedly said, "What do you need, fellow Taoist? Please tell us. As long as it's something that I and my senior brother can do, we will agree to it." Zhang Yan's expression suddenly became extremely serious. He said, "I have been practicing with fellow Taoist Lu for the past few days. I noticed that although this mountain and river's momentum contains the method to break the formation, it needs to interact with the formation. Otherwise, I won't be able to figure out the details. Therefore, I need to see the formation in person to have an idea." Lu Guo hurriedly stood up and said, "I can prove that fellow Taoist Zhang's words are true. A few days ago, when I was asking for guidance, there were several difficulties. Fellow Taoist Zhang once said that if I don't see the formation in person and can't verify it from the side, I won't be able to discern the true meaning of the formation even if I have the erosion glyphs." Duanmu Li pondered for a while and finally said, "What Taoist Zhang said is also a reasonable request. In that case, third junior brother, please move to Turtle Snake Mountain and observe the formation." Chapter 440. After Zhang Yan left Duanmu Li's place, he was led by Lu Guo to the foot of Turtle Snake Mountain. Since the mountain was locked by a formation, they couldn't fly, so the two of them entered the mountain through a small gravel path. After walking for less than 100 steps, he saw a clear green pond. It was about an acre in size, and the ripples were clear and crystalline. Waterfowl were swimming leisurely in the pond. The pond was surrounded by jagged rocks, shaded by trees, and a cave could be vaguely seen hidden behind it. The ground in front of the cave was laid with hexagonal jade bricks, which were swept clean. A young boy stood beside the two purple wooden doors. He was quite quick-witted and called out from afar, "Third master is here." Full of joy, he pushed the door open and stood respectfully to one side. When they reached the door, Lu Guo first patted the child's head, then turned to the side and politely said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, after you." Zhang Yan cupped his hands and stepped inside. Suddenly, the light in front of him dimmed. He had entered a cave. The cave was more than 500 feet long and wide, with stalactites hanging from the ceiling like thorns and bamboo shoots. The sound of water dripping was as clear as the strings of a zither. Two bright jade lamps stood on the left and right, giving off a soft halo. There was a stone staircase in the middle that could accommodate 4 people walking side by side. However, the staircase was damaged everywhere, and moss had seeped into the cracks, as if it had been abandoned for many years. After Lu Guo, he walked into the cave and pointed at the small path. "Fellow Taoist, please take a look. This stone staircase leads straight to the peak of Turtle Snake Mountain, but there are 36 formation doors on the way. Back then, there was an uncle master from my sect who came here and lived for hundreds of years. He broke through the first 8 formations. I'm ashamed, I've studied it for more than 300 years, but I still haven't reached the 9th layer. I'm really useless." At this point, his face was also filled with shame. Among the 3 of them, he was the only one who knew a little about formations, but he didn't understand much. In addition, he couldn't decipher the eroded runes, so he could only waste his time here. Over the years, second senior brother Hong An had repeatedly asked for help from the outside world to break the formation, but eldest senior brother Duanmu Li had turned him down. He could only brace himself and continue. Fortunately, Zhang Yan's arrival gave him a glimmer of hope. The two of them walked up the stone steps. After walking up 108 steps, the path under his feet led to the exit of the cave. It was about 10 steps away. Zhang Yan's eyes lit up as he raised his head to look over. He noticed that he was standing on a 300 wide stone platform, and his position just happened to be at the back of Turtle Snake Mountain. At this moment, the sky was still bright and illuminated the surroundings, and what entered his eyes was an expanse of lofty and beautiful peaks. On the jagged cliffs, there were clusters of green velvet and tenacious vines in the cracks of the rocks. About 10 steps to the left of the cave door, there was another row of stone steps that led to the second floor. Just as Zhang Yan was about to take a step forward, his gaze shifted. Next to the cave door, he found a 3-foot-tall bronze plate embedded deeply into the stone wall. There were many words written on it, and it was vaguely discernible that they were written in etchings, but it seemed to be from a long time ago. After being eroded by the wind and rain, it had long become indistinct. Lu Gua followed him over, pointed at it, and explained, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, there are etchings like this at the entrance of the 1st to the 8th floor of the formation. They are the secrets to breaking the formation. However, after breaking the formation, the spiritual energy has already dissipated, and it has long been rusted. I came here a long time ago, and the words are still quite clear. I was afraid that there might be something hidden in them, and it would be inappropriate if they were lost, so I made other copies." Zhang Yan nodded and praised, "Fellow Taoist Lu is meticulous and meticulous. May I know where those copies are now?" Lu Gua felt excited after hearing Zhang Yan's praise. He said, "I have these copies with me every day. They are all here. Please have a look." He took out a jade disc from his sleeve and handed it over. Zhang Yan reached out and took it. He held it in his hand and looked at it for a while. At first, he was surprised, but then he showed a thoughtful expression. Seeing his expression, Lu Gua moved forward and asked curiously, "Fellow Taoist, did you see anything?" Zhang Yan turned his wrist and put the jade disc into his sleeve. He said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you overestimate I. How could I see anything in such a short time? When we go back, I will carefully study it. Fellow Taoist, don't be anxious." Lu Gua sincerely cupped her hands and bowed deeply. She said, "Then I will leave it to you, fellow Taoist." After talking for a while, the two of them continued forward. This time, they didn't stop. They passed through 8 stone steps and arrived at the entrance of the 9th floor of the formation. Just now they stopped. Zhang Yan saw that if they went further up, the mountain path would be covered by spiritual clouds. He looked into the distance, and from time to time, there would be illusory lights flashing. Seeing that he was standing a little closer, Lu Gua's expression changed. She hurriedly grabbed his sleeve and said in shock, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, don't go any further. This formation is extremely powerful. I previously released a few spiritual birds inside, and in the blink of an eye, they were all turned into meat paste." Zhang Yan smiled and gently broke free from her hand. He pointed forward and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, don't worry. I just want to take a closer look at the engravings on the plate." Lu Gua let out a sigh of relief. She wiped the cold sweat from her forehead and said, "Fellow Taoist, please take your time." In front of the formation, there was still a bronze plate similar to the one they saw before. However, it was different from before. The surface of the plate was enshrouded in spiritual light, and the words looked like they had been engraved. It was obviously under the protection of the formation. Zhang Yan looked at it, and his expression became serious. He said in a deep voice, "The engravings here are several times more difficult than just now. I'm afraid I will have to spend some time to slowly deduce them." Lu Gua sighed and said, "I can't help you with this matter. I can only trouble you." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. He sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes to meditate. Lu Gua saw that he seemed to be immersed in it. She was stunned for a moment. She walked around on the spot a few times before finally retreating quietly. After the footsteps went far away, after a while, Zhang Yan opened his eyes and released a stream of smoke, enveloping the stone platform. He then took out the hero's knot-fish drum from his sleeves and held it horizontally in front of him, whispering, "Is Shi Shu here?" A green light flashed, and the fish drum true spirit came out. He took a few steps forward and looked at the formation in front of him. He clicked his tongue. Zhang Yan didn't stand up. He only said, "Uncle Master, can I harvest the Azure Yang Astral Spirit here?" The fish drum true spirit chuckled and said, "I can try." He stretched out his hand and a stream of clear air came out of nowhere. It slowly gathered in his hand and finally condensed into a grain of green jade the size of a grain of rice. After a while, there was another grain. As time passed, more and more grains gathered in his hand. After 2 hours, there were already over 100 grains in his hand. Zhang Yan stared at it. His eyes lit up. He stood up and said, "Is this the Azure Yang Astral Spirit?" He walked to the fish drum true spirit's side and reached out to grab a handful of it. He held it in his palm. The object was crystal clear, like a jade. It shone brilliantly, but its weight was light. Its aura was slightly heavy, and it floated up like dust. It was several inches high, but it didn't disperse. The fish drum true spirit was slightly dissatisfied. He said, "This place is still far from the extreme heaven. The essence energy contained in the astral spirit is too thin. Although it is useful to you, the effect is minimal. You might not be able to enter the Yuanying realm even after cultivating for 100 years. But if you have the ability to reach the peak of this mountain, it won't be an extravagant hope to break through the gate in half a cycle of 60 years. Zhang Yan looked up with a resolute expression. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Then let's go to the peak." At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He waved his sleeves and gathered all the smoke in the area. The fish drum true spirit also disappeared. A moment later, Lugua came up the stone platform with a Tao child with delicate features. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist deduced the eroding runes. It must be quite tiring. You must have no one to serve you. Eldest senior brother ordered this little brother to send a Tao child here for you to use. If it doesn't suit your taste, this little brother will find someone else." Zhang Yan glanced at the Tao child. He saw that the Tao child was dressed like a jade carving and looked intelligent. However, his eyes were flickering. It was obvious that his thoughts weren't pure. Zhang Yan couldn't help but be surprised. How could he not know Duanmu Li's intentions? This Tao child was a servant in name, but in reality he was worried about him. He was just using him to monitor him. He smiled and said, "Temple Master Duanmu is considerate. Leave this Tao child here." Lugua patted the Tao child's back and said, "Quickly greet Taoist Zhang." The Tao child hurriedly bowed and said, "Little Tong Zhong Xen greets Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan responded indifferently. Lugua was afraid that she would disturb Zhang Yan's thoughts, so she hurriedly left after saying her greetings. After he left, Zhang Yan called Zhong Xen over and said, "When I'm deducing the technique, you have to stand a little further away. You're not allowed to come within 3 zhang of me without my permission. Otherwise, if I accidentally kill you, it'll be your own fault for seeking death. Do you understand?" Zhong Xian's face paled and he hurriedly said, "This Tao child doesn't dare, this Tao child doesn't dare." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and said, "Step aside for now." Zhong Xen hurriedly retreated dozens of steps and stopped 10 zhang away. Just now, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of disappointment on his small face. He was actually not a servant boy, but a disciple that Duanmu Li had taken in 2 years ago. Other than to check on Zhang Yan's movements, he had also come with the intention of secretly learning the erosion symbol deduction technique. Seeing how cautious Zhang Yan was, he instantly felt that his chances were slim. Zhang Yan ignored him and calmed his mind to deduce the inscriptions on the bronze plate. After a moment, he could see that if he followed the orthodox method, it would take him a year and a half to fully understand it. Moreover, even if he obtained the method, it might not necessarily be the orthodox method. He would still need to use a spirit bird to break through the formation and verify it, which would delay him even more. It was easy to imagine how difficult the 27 formations would be. Fortunately, he had the remnant jade to help him, otherwise he would definitely be trapped here. However, just as he was about to borrow the remnant jade, a light suddenly flashed in his mind as if he had thought of something. With a flip of his hand, he took out the jade plate that Lugua had handed to him. When he looked at it carefully, he couldn't help but reveal a somewhat strange expression. These 8 formations didn't seem like much individually, but when they were linked together, it became somewhat interesting. Just from the inscriptions alone, it seemed that they went from shallow to deep, and the further they went, the more difficult they became. If it wasn't for someone who was proficient in this Tao, he would never have been able to see it. If his guess was correct, perhaps there was no need to go through so much trouble. He thought for a moment and flicked his finger. The stellar sword orb flew out and hovered beside him. This object was connected to his mind, so if someone approached while he was deducing, it would definitely alert him. Then he reached into his sleeve and held the remnant jade. His mind sank into it and he patiently deduced. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 441. Zhang Yan was completely focused on deducing the inscriptions. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed, and in the remnant jade, it had been more than 3 years. When he withdrew his consciousness, all the doubts in his mind were gone. The inscriptions didn't just mention the method to break the formation, but also the method to set up the formation, and the formation array. Most importantly, all the techniques here were guided layer by layer, and they were arranged from simple to complicated. The changes contained within the previous formation would be formed upon the foundation of the next formation, and the grand formation after that would be formed in the same manner. Even someone who didn't know anything about formations, if they carefully studied these 36 formations, they could become a person with a rough understanding of formations after years of study. Zhang Yan boldly speculated that the senior who set up the formation probably wanted to use the Dharma treasure as a guide to teach his juniors about formations. Although he had the method to break the formation, it wasn't easy for him to break the remaining 27 formations with his current cultivation. He wouldn't be able to do it without at least 20 to 30 years. If it was another time, he could still calm down, follow the rules, and climb up step by step. At the same time, he could also study the Tao of formations. However, he had come here to collect the Qingyang Ganjing so that he could achieve Yuanying in time to show off at the sword competition of the 16 sects. Thus, he couldn't wait that long. Zhang Yan looked at the array door that was flickering with golden light and pondered for a moment. Actually, it was not that there was no shortcut to the mountain peak. Now that there was no one presiding over the formation, it meant that the changes within couldn't be activated. It could only move according to the formation. He had the method in his hands, so if he wanted to pass through the formation by himself, it would not be a difficult task. Even if there were some mistakes when crossing the formation, such as taking a wrong step or half a step, with the protection of his treasured robe and the divine contract cultivation technique, he would be able to block a few attacks. However, if he entered the formation just like that, it wouldn't be good if Duanmu Li and the others had other tricks up their sleeves. After thinking about it for a while, his eyes flashed. He already had an idea. He formed a hand seal and pointed 3 feet away, saying, "Appear." After the mist passed, a substitute that looked exactly like him appeared, sitting cross-legged on the ground. This true image technique had been helped by the true seal essence energy. Now, the body that was formed was not only exactly the same as before. Moreover, there was no sense of rigidity or dullness in his expression. Apart from being unable to speak, he was no different from a real person. He thought that with this substitute here, he would be able to confuse them for a while and wait for Duanmu Mian and the others to realize that something was wrong. He had probably already exited the formation and reached the peak of the mountain. After circling the substitute once more and seeing that there were no more flaws, he waved his sleeves and walked into the formation door. He disappeared in a flash. Zhang Yan followed the instructions of the incantation and carefully walked up the mountain path. After half an hour, he successfully passed through this formation and arrived at the front of the 10th formation. This arrangement was exactly the same as before. There was still a bronze plate embedded in front of the array door, on which was written the method to break the array. He looked at it carefully and memorized it. Then he sat down in a lotus position, holding the broken jade in his hand and silently deduced. 3 days later, he had already understood the key to passing the array. He smiled slightly. He stood up and strode inside. He walked and stopped, and before he knew it, 3 months had passed. At this moment, he was standing in front of the last formation. Zhang Yan stood in front of the formation door with his hands behind his back. His face was solemn. He was not in a hurry to enter, but he repeatedly deduced the method to break the array in his mind. After all, he only had a smattering of knowledge in the Tao of formations, so it was inevitable for him to make some mistakes. It wasn't all smooth sailing when he tried to break through the formation earlier, and there were times when he stepped on the wrong formation. Fortunately, he had the protection of the treasured robe mysterious technique, so he was able to break through without any mishaps. However, the further he went, the more difficult the formation became. This last big formation must be extremely powerful. If he made a mistake, he would be doomed. He had to be extra careful. After deducing for a full 10 days, he no longer hesitated. He lifted his sleeves, raised his feet, and walked towards the formation door. After walking for less than 20 steps, he suddenly heard the sound of the wind. It was like a cry, and the air was like a blade. With a chi sound, it cut open a wound on his face. After walking for a few dozen steps, he had hundreds of wounds on his body even with the protection of the treasure robe. After another 100 steps, his entire body was like a bloody man. The wind blew faster and faster, as if it was stopping him from moving forward. It made people suspect that if this continued, he would be skinned and torn apart. If it was someone else, they would probably suspect that they had walked into the wrong position. However, his expression did not change. His face was calm as if he did not feel anything. His footsteps were still firm as he walked forward. He had used a trick to get through this, and it was not the right way. It was expected that he would suffer some hardships, but as long as his life was not in danger, it did not matter. After walking another 10 steps, the sound of the wind dissipated, and the wind gradually stopped. He circulated his Xian Qi and the wounds on his body closed. When he raised his head again, he noticed that he had already stepped out of the formation and arrived at the top of Turtle Snake Mountain. The place he stood on was only 15 feet in circumference. 10 steps away, there was a strange white rock. It was enormous, without edges or corners, and it was shaped like an egg. The top half of it was buried in the sky. He raised his head and looked up. There were numerous cold and sharp winds raging above him. They spiraled to and fro, and they seemed to be within reach. He stood at the peak of the mountain and shouted. He took out the heroic fish drum in the air. As soon as this magic treasure appeared, it suddenly shook and transformed into a ray of light. It instantly broke through the wind and flew above the clouds. In just a few breaths of time, an enraged roar of thunder suddenly sounded out, shaking the heavens and the earth. Strong winds swirled as a rift was suddenly sliced open in the sky, revealing the void beyond the heavens. Numerous bolts of lightning danced wildly like dragons and snakes as they carried countless verdant sand sprouts as they flew towards the fish drum and converged. After a while, there was a sudden sound like a drop of water from a clear spring. A deep green jade fell from the crack. Zhang Yan caught it in his hand. He felt that it was smooth and glossy. Even if he didn't absorb it into his body, he could feel the unfathomable and shocking vitality within it. After being tempered by the fish drum, it had completely lost its violent nature. It was calm and peaceful, and it was suitable to be used. This green sun elite was originally a flying star that scattered dust. Because there were astral winds swirling above the extreme heaven, it prevented it from falling into the mortal world. Thus, it wandered around the extreme heaven. As for those towering peaks that towered into the clouds, they became the only places they could attach themselves to. After being illuminated by the sun, moon, and stars for 10,000 years, they absorbed the pure yang energy outside the void and were finally tempered into this form. Central Pillar Continent was originally the highest place in the 9 continents. This Kunyu Tortoise Snake Mountain was even built on top of the pillar. Since the 9 continents were created, countless green sun elite gathered here. Other than those cultivators above Yuanying, no one could go up here. That fish drum true spirit pushed aside the stellar chi and suddenly appeared from the gap. It said loudly, "Martial nephew Zhang, this azure dipper yang ing can't be contaminated by the mortal world." Quickly refine it, I'll find another piece for you. Zhang Yan didn't hesitate anymore. He sat down cross-legged and with the green jade in his hand, he circulated his qi. In a split second, a wave of pure essence entered his body. The mana in his body immediately surged and almost burst out. Such abundant essence surprised him. But this thought only appeared for a moment before it was erased from his heart. He didn't think too much about it and focused on refining it. Suddenly, he closed his eyes, ears, mouth and nose, leaving only his inner breath and spirit to guide the qi. It was as if he had come back from death and went into meditation. He absorbed the green sun elite jade and was completely unaware of what was happening around him. At the bottom of Tortoise Snake Mountain, Zhong Exen was still monitoring Zhang Yan all day. He saw him meditating day and night, almost like a stone statue. After a long time, he also slacked off. At first, he reported once a day, then once every 10 days, and then once every month. On this day, when he was feeling bored, he suddenly noticed someone standing in front of him. He couldn't help but jump in fright. He looked up and hurriedly said, "Xiao Tong greets second master." Hong'an grunted. He looked at the substitute that Zhang Yan left behind and said, "Did this Taoist Zhang say anything before he went into meditation?" Zhong Exan lowered his head and said, replying to second master, "He didn't. Since he went into meditation, he still hasn't woken up." Hong'an waved his hand and said, "I have a few words with Taoist Zhang, you can leave for a moment." Zhong Exen didn't dare to disobey and said, "Yes, I will wait outside." Hong'an's small eyes were shining. He put on a smile on his face and walked forward. He stopped 10 feet away from Zhang Yan, raised his hands and bowed, saying, "Taoist Zhang, Hong'an is here to visit." Zhang Yan didn't say anything and didn't move. Hong'an looked at him in surprise and said something again. He still didn't get a response. He hesitated for a moment and probed, "Since Taoist Zhang has no time, I will come back another day?" He waited for a while and saw that Zhang Yan still didn't say anything. He shook his head and turned around to leave, but a little suspicion arose in his heart. He stopped and slowly turned around. He looked at Zhang Yan's face for a while and moved his feet lightly. After a while, he reached out and put his hand on Zhang Yan's shoulder. His expression suddenly changed. His expression was uncertain for a while. He clenched and loosened his fists a few times. Just now, he returned to normal and walked out as if nothing had happened. He waved his hand and called Zhong Exin over. He said, "Taoist Zhang is at a critical point in his divination. Don't disturb him if there's nothing important. Otherwise, even if you're the disciple of eldest senior brother, I will still take your life." Zhong Exin knelt on the ground and said, "I will. I won't dare to ruin second master's business." Hong'an looked back once more, then left the mountain. With a leap, he transformed into a long smoke and flew away. Not long after, he was out of Kuan Island. Then, he waved his sleeve and a flying talisman flew away without a trace. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior brother, don't blame me. Even if you and I get this treasure, how can we guard it?" After the talisman was sent out, it flew into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it had already crossed thousands of rivers and mountains. Finally, it flew to a valley surrounded by green water and green mountains. After a few rounds, as if someone was receiving it, it went into a cave abode and fell into the hands of an ancient Taoist. This Taoran had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He wore a 9-beam crown and a sun and moon purple gold robe. There was a cloud above his head. He opened the letter and said coldly, "This Hong'an is really incompetent. He can't even guard the treasure. Taoran, I want to see who dares to take what the Lai Xian sect wants, to be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 442. The double that Zhang Yan left behind could not be hidden for long. In less than 2 years, Duan Muli, who personally entered the mountain to investigate, saw through it. When Duan Muli found out, he was shocked and angry. But the formation was not broken. He did not know if Zhang Yan had left or gone to do something else. He was not afraid that Zhang Yan was still hiding in the mountain, but he was afraid that he would attract outsiders to come and steal the treasure. Especially when Zhang Yan knew the way to enter and leave Kunyu, it really made him restless. In the beginning, he ordered his disciples to be careful, be on guard, and guard the mountain gate. But after a dozen years, there was no movement, so he was slightly relieved. After a dozen years of peace, Duanmu Li did not take this matter to heart as seriously as before. If the other party did not die and coveted the treasure, he would have come here long ago and not wait until now. He closed the door and rejected guests, cultivating in peace, but the outside world was changing. 20 years ago, Lai Xian sect used the Zhenluo Union's massacre of the sect's disciples, gathered tens of thousands of disciples, and attacked Pingxi. But at this time, the Zhenluo Union rebelled. Over the years, they fought a few times, but were always defeated, losing a large piece of land, and now retreating deep into the mountains. Because Pingxi was vast, and because Qing Shiguan and Jinling sect were afraid that Lai Xian sect's power was too great, they secretly held them back, and so their attacks slowed down. But no one knew that Lai Xian sect's big fanfare on the surface was to invade the celestial family's blessed land, but in reality, they had other intentions. And they prepared for more than 300 years. On this day, Duanmu Li was meditating when he suddenly felt a wave of irritation in his heart. He thought of a lesson and suddenly heard the sound of a jade bell and zither coming from outside. He couldn't help but be surprised and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" "Child, go out and take a look." The child received the order and went out, but not long after, he ran back. He pointed outside in panic and said, "Master, master, there are many people outside the mountain." "What?" Duanmu Li stood up abruptly and thought to himself, "Don't tell me it's because of that Taoist Zhang?" His mouth said, "Second Shidi, follow me to take a look." However, he called out a few times but didn't get a response. Only then did he realize that he hadn't seen this person for a day. He asked, "Where is Second Master?" Trembling with fear, the boy said, "Second Master has left the mountain just now." Duanmu Li fiercely tugged at his beard as he faintly felt that something was amiss. He hurriedly said, "Quickly go and summon Third Master." Outside Kuan Island, there were more than 1,000 cultivators standing in the void. Above them, there were more than 10 cloud rafts lined up in a row. Daoren, who was dressed in a sun and moon robe, was sitting in the middle. Dozens of male and female disciples of different appearances were riding on boats and birds, riding on clouds and wind, accompanying him. There was another Taoist beside him. He was also sitting, but his expression was a little more vicious. Looking at his face, it was by Kechuan's master, Pang Yuzhong, Pang Jinren. At this moment, a cloud of smoke flew out from Kuan Island. It landed in front of Daoren and a fat Taoist appeared. He bowed from afar and said respectfully, "Hong'an welcomes the two Zenrens." Daoren raised his eyelids slightly and said, "Hong'an, has the treasure been lost?" Hong'an hurriedly bowed and said, "Zhenren Gua, I have been guarding the mountain day and night, not daring to slack off. Now the treasure is still alive on the Turtle Snake Mountain, waiting for the celestial masters of Lai Xian sect to come and retrieve it." After saying this, he bowed to Pang Yuzhong as if he was flattering him. Zhenren Guo waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and said, Since you are willing to worship my ancestor, then you can be considered as one of the members of Lai Xian sect. After we get the treasure, we will reward you according to your contributions when we return." Hong'an was overjoyed and immediately knelt down and said, "Thank you, Zhenren." With this delay, Zhenren Pang was already a little impatient and said, "What are you waiting for? Why don't you lead the way?" Hong'an stood up and took the lead, leading the group into the mountain. At this moment, the sun was setting and Zhenren Gua saw that the ground was covered with auspicious trees and grass, the mountain was dyed and the scenery was beautiful. He slightly nodded and said, "Such a blessed land can be our sect's dojo." Pang Yuzhong also echoed, "Senior brother is right. How can such a mediocre person have the fortune to enjoy this land?" They were wantonly commenting here and Hong'an heard it clearly, but he looked calm as if what they said had nothing to do with him. When the disciples behind Zhenren Gua and Zhenren Pang looked at his back, they couldn't help but show disdain in their eyes. Hong'an was flying forward when he suddenly stopped and looked at Duanmu Li and Lu Gua who were flying over from afar. His expression changed slightly and he bowed from afar and said, eldest senior brother. Duanmu Li's face was livid. He forcefully suppressed the boiling anger in his heart and his lips trembled a little as he said, Hong'an, you, why are you doing this? Lu Guo was also unusually angry. Her eyes were filled with anger as she stared at this second senior brother. Hong'an didn't dare to look at the two of them and lowered his head, saying, eldest senior brother, there is a limit to a person's strength. With our cultivation base and lifespan, what's the use even if we occupy the spiritual item in this turtle snake mountain? Why don't we offer it earlier in exchange for hundreds of years of wealth and bliss? Isn't that great? Duanmu Li stared at him for a while as if he had never known him before and laughed bitterly. To think that we have cultivated together for hundreds of years, I see you as my own flesh and blood. I didn't expect you to do such a thing, to actually hand over the treasure that has been passed down from generation to generation in the sect. Today, I will clean up the sect on behalf of my master. He raised his hand and struck out a bolt of lightning. Hong'an turned pale with fright as he saw the lightning falling on his head. It was already too late to dodge. Spiritual Master Pang smiled coldly and pointed with his finger. Before the lightning could reach him, it dissipated halfway. He then said, fellow Taoist Duanmu, this Hong'an is now a disciple of my Lai Xian sect. It's not up to you to deal with him. Duanmu Li glanced at him, then looked at Spiritual Master Gua and said sternly, Guomingda, do you think that I is easy to bully? If we really fight to the death, how many of these disciples of yours can survive? Without waiting for Spiritual Master Gua to speak, Pang Yuzhong chuckled and stood out, saying, Duanmu Li, don't think that I don't know your background. If your cultivation was still perfect, we would have hesitated for a while. But after you were severely injured by Ouyang Su of Zhenluo Union, you have been recuperating for all these years. Until now, you still haven't recovered. You're like a piece of paper. How can us two brothers be afraid of you? Duanmu Li knew that he couldn't be merciful today, but he wasn't willing to be captured without a fight. Just as he was about to make a move, Pang Yuzhong's eyes flashed and he was already in front of him. His sleeve shook slightly and a jade tablet flew out. This item didn't have any light, and its movement was extremely secretive. By the time Duanmu Li noticed it, it had already flown in front of him. Just as he was about to dodge, he saw the jade tablet emit a yellow light that covered him in an instant. He felt his body stiffen and his limbs didn't listen to him. At this moment, the jade tablet flew over and lightly knocked on his forehead. Then his eyes rolled back. His eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground as if he had lost his soul. Pang Yuzhong waved his hand and called the jade tablet back. He said coldly, hand it over. Immediately, two disciples flew out from behind him and captured him. When Lu Guojian fought, his eldest senior brother was captured. His eyes were about to pop out of his eye sockets. He reached into his sleeve and wanted to take out a talisman to fight in the formation. Guomingda, who was sitting there, glanced at him. With a casual wave of his sleeve, a violent flow swept over and sent him flying. Another two disciples came up and easily captured him. One of them was a girl with a cloud and colorful pendant. She said with a smile, Master, this person is quite handsome. Why don't we bring him back and extract his soul to refine him into that god altar warrior? Guomingda waved his hand. He said indifferently, commit suicide yourself, don't ask me. The girl said happily, thank you, master. Pang Yuzhong ordered his disciples to bring Duanmu Li before him and used a spell to wake him up. He asked, fellow Taoist Duanmu, are you willing to revere our ancestors as gods? Duanmu Li stared at him angrily and said, if you want to kill me, then kill me. If you want me, Daoren, to deceive my master and destroy my ancestors, I can't. Pang Yuzhong tried to persuade him again, but Duanmu Li was still scolding him. Pang Yuzhong's patience was worn out. He said coldly, stubborn, there's no point in keeping you alive. He raised a finger and tapped on the center of Duanmu Li's brows. Duanmu Li's body trembled and he died in an instant. With the two of them gone, there was no one to stop them on Kuan Island. Guomingda looked into the distance and pointed at a strange-shaped mountain. He said, Hong'an, is this where the treasure is hidden? Hong'an saw that his senior brother was so weak in front of the two of them. He couldn't help but feel glad that he made the choice earlier. With a fawning expression he said, Zhenrenguo's eyes are sharp. This is the Turtle Snake Mountain. The treasure is in the mountain. Guomingda stroked his beard and nodded. He said, you mentioned in the letter that someone entered the formation? Hong An's expression changed slightly. He quickly lowered his head and said, it's true. That day I was afraid that something might go wrong, so I had no choice but to send a letter. But after all these years, there hasn't been any movement. He must have either left or died long ago. Guomingda turned around and said to Pang Yuzhong, I heard that not only did this person destroy a branch of our sect, he also killed one of Junior Brother Pang's disciples? Pang Yuzhong snorted and said, Junior Brother, I'm here for this person. If this person is dead, then I'll let it go. If he's still alive, I'll capture his soul and place it on the altar so that he can suffer for eternity. Guomingda said, Hongan, lead the way and bring us to the mountain to observe the formation. Hongan bowed and said, yes, please follow me, spiritual masters. At the peak of the Turtle Snake Mountain, Zhang Yan had been sitting here for 28 years. All these years he had absorbed no less than 1,000 pieces of azure yang energy jade to nourish his inner core. His first-grade golden core was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much chi of essence came, it would be swallowed up. Now he had refined another piece of azure yang energy jade into a pile of gray powder. He opened his eyes and was about to use the fish drum to take down the azure yang energy jade. However, at this moment, the golden core in his abdomen suddenly trembled. Following that, all the acupoints in his body also moved. His eyes narrowed and he quickly sat down. He didn't dare to move recklessly. This was a sign that the chi of essence had been absorbed to the extreme and was about to transform. He could faintly feel that the time to form a nascent soul had arrived. He calmed his mind and slowly breathed out. He didn't disturb the changes and let nature take its course. After a while, he suddenly felt a force stirring within his body. At first, it was so subtle that it was almost undetectable. Then, it flowed like a stream. Then, it grew stronger and stronger, larger and larger. It was like a surging river, the power of 100 rivers converging into the sea. When the force reached its peak, his body trembled and he felt an irresistible force bursting out of his body. His mind was bombarded and the golden core in his abdomen was shattered. A deafening explosion resounded throughout the entire Kuan Island. A gust of clear chi rose from the bottom of his body and rushed to the top of his head. It was so powerful that it actually smashed a hole in the extreme heavenly gang chi. The clear chi rushed to the extreme heaven and traveled 100 miles. Just now it stopped. Then it trembled and spread out. In the endless light, a 10 feet tall Yuanying golden body appeared. This Yuanying golden body stood in the void, stepping on auspicious clouds. Its body was bathed in 100 feet golden light. 5-colored chi rotated and rotated behind its back. It was dazzling and overflowing with auspicious colors. There were also hundreds of spiritual lights revolving around its body. It was like fireflies dancing in the sky. As soon as the Yuanying appeared, the peak of the Turtle Snake Mountain was illuminated by a golden light. Half of the sky was illuminated. Thousands of rays of light shone on the mountains. The light was as bright as the sun. The momentum was immeasurable. Even from thousands of miles away, one could see the rainbow light up the sky on Kuan Island. Such a big scene, even Guomingda and Pang Yuzhong, the two Zhenren, looked at each other in shock. They couldn't help but stop in their tracks. At this moment, Zhang Yan only felt that the mana in his body had increased. It was as if a single movement of his hands and feet could perform a magnificent power. With a thought, the Yuanying golden body raised its hand and pointed. With a loud bang, a purple ray of lightning fell from the extreme heaven and landed on the Turtle Snake Mountain. It penetrated through 27 formations. The remaining force didn't decrease. It went out of the formation and went 100 feet away. Just now, it slowly dispersed. Zhang Yan smiled and stood up. He chanted, Yin and Yang Qi are involved in life. The primordial Qi is hidden in the chest. The 5 elements are performed. The spirit climbs the mountain ridge. The heavenly pillar is refined. The sound of the sword is heard in the clouds. It sweeps away the evil and purifies the qi. The heart is like a dragon and tiger. The sea and the river are turned green. He collected the surging inner qi one by one. Then the clear qi on the top of the door fell. The Yuanying golden body returned to his body. He rolled up his sleeves and kept the strange stone on the mountain peak. Then he took a step outside and moved 1,000 feet away. In the blink of an eye, he was at the foot of the mountain. Carrot. Chapter 443. As soon as the formation on the Turtle Snake Mountain was broken, Guojing and Pang, 2 people, rode the wind up the mountain. Suddenly they saw a Taoist with his 2 sleeves swaying. He was singing a song. Above his head was a cloud of clear air. Behind his back there was a 5-colored light. It was extraordinary. The 2 people were surprised. Pang Yuzhong looked at the top of the mountain and saw that it was empty. His expression changed and he whispered, "Senior Marshal Brother, this is bad. I'm afraid the treasures in the mountain have been taken by this person." Pang Mingda also frowned. They came here for this treasure. This treasure was related to the rise and fall of Lai Xian sect, so they couldn't afford to lose it. However, they didn't expect that someone would come and steal it just as they were about to get their hands on it. However, when he thought about the aura he displayed when he was at the nascent soul stage, he was sure to be someone with an unparalleled foundation for such a shocking phenomenon to appear. Perhaps he had some unknown tricks up his sleeves. If they were to fight, even if he could defeat this person, he might not be able to come out unscathed. Thus, if he could avoid fighting, then it was best not to. Guomingda waved his horsetail whisk and went forward. He bowed and said, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and returned the greeting. "Fellow Taoists, why did you call me here? What can I do for you?" When Zhang Yan was in the distance earlier, Pang Yuzhong had already recognized his appearance. It was precisely the person who had raped his disciple. However, compared to his disciple, the matter of the treasure was more important, so he could only put it aside for the time being and ask, "Did fellow Taoist take the treasure in the mountain?" Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. He admitted, "If it is as you said, it is the strange stone on the mountain." "That's right, I took it." Pang Mingda said in a deep voice, "I know you are from the East Flower Continent. The treasure in the mountain belongs to the Lai Xian sect in the Middle Pillar Continent. If you take it, it might be inappropriate. I hope you can keep it. Otherwise, it won't be good if there is a misunderstanding." Zhang Yan heard this and laughed. He laughed and waved his sleeves, shouting, "Let's not talk about what this is. Even if it's a rare treasure, it should belong to the vast Qingdao Palace. How did it become an item of your Lai Xian sect?" Pang Yuzhong sneered. He turned around and said, "Hongan, come up." Hongan walked forward anxiously. He had never expected that in the past 28 years, he would not be able to keep his promise. Not only did Zhang Yan not leave, but he was also yuanying in this place. When he looked over, his eyes were filled with shock and fear. He didn't even dare to speak loudly. He said, "What orders do the 2 spiritual masters have?" Pang Yuzhong pointed at Hongan. He said loudly, "This is Hongan, a disciple of the vast Qingdao Palace. He is willing to offer this treasure to my sect, so it belongs to my sect." Zhang Yan raised his brows and asked, "Where is Duanmu Mian, the head of the Haoxing Palace?" Pang Yuzhong snorted and said coldly, "Duanmu Mian is old and muddle-headed. How dare he try to go against the Lai Xian sect? What a joke! He overestimated himself. Now, the person in charge of the vast Path Temple is Hongan." His words contained a hint of threat, implying that he wanted to make things difficult for them. That would be the end result. Zhang Yan didn't care and said plainly, "That's not necessarily true. There's another person besides Hongan. He can also decide who this treasure belongs to." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already standing in front of the young woman who had captured Lu Gua. Seeing a yuanying spiritual master suddenly appear in front of her, the girl couldn't help but turn pale. The disciples standing nearby were even more frightened and instinctively wanted to take out their Dharma treasures. Gua and Pang Yuzhong were shocked and said at the same time, "No." They knew very well that if these disciples offended a Yuanying cultivator, no matter how many of them there were, they would be killed. Zhang Yan coldly snorted and waved his sleeve. Before the disciple could do anything, he was swept away by a gust of astral wind, leaving only Lu Guo in place. Zhang Yan raised his hand and brushed it over her body, removing the seal on her head. Just now, Lu Guo had already woken up and heard clearly what Zhang Yan, Guo, and Pang Yuzhong said. However, she couldn't make a sound because her inner qi was restrained. Now that she was free, she jumped up and bowed to Zhang Yan. She said gratefully, "Thank you for saving me, fellow Taoist." Then he pointed at Hong'an and scolded, "Hong'an, how dare you call yourself a disciple of the vast Qingdao temple? You colluded with outsiders and plotted to kill your master. Our vast Qingdao palace doesn't have disciples like you who betray their masters and destroy their ancestors." Hong'an was humiliated by his scolding, but Lu Guo was standing beside Zhang Yan. Even Guo and Pang Yuzhong weren't in a hurry to make a move, so Hong'an could only swallow his anger for the time being. Zhang Yan glanced at Lu Guo and said slowly, "Fellow Taoist Lu, don't be impatient. I know that fellow Taoist Duanmu and Pang Yuzhong were killed, but if you promise to give me this treasure, I'm willing to avenge them for you." Just now, when he was breaking the formation, he had already sensed some clues about this treasure. If his guess was correct, then he was determined to get this treasure and wouldn't allow anyone else to lay their hands on it. If it was before, Lu Guo might have hesitated, but now, his mind was filled with thoughts of revenge. He said without thinking, "If you can avenge eldest senior brother, I'm willing to give you this treasure. I won't go back on my word." Guomingda's face darkened. "Fellow Taoist, are you sure you want to make things difficult for us?" Pang Yuzhong sneered and said, "Senior brother, why are you still talking to him? Today's matter won't end peacefully. Let's just do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he snorted, and the Yuanying leaped out from the top of the door. This Yuanying was covered in a thin layer of golden dust and emitted auspicious light that reflected dozens of feet away. Above the top of the door, there was also a cloud of stellar energy that hovered with specks of fine sand, like flying stars in a furnace. Guomingda waved his horsetail whisk, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. With a shout, smoke and fire burst out, and thousands of lights and shadows appeared. The Yuanying also came out, holding a smoke net in each hand. One was dark and gloomy, and the other was white like snow accumulated in a pile of frost. However, it was different from Pang Yuzhong. Above the top of the door, there were two balls of stellar energy, one on the left and one on the right. One was 3 feet big, like 1,000 snowy peaks, condensed and real. The other was sparse and thin, like a cloud of mist, its shape constantly changing. Zhang Yan laughed and took a step forward. There was a loud sound, and clear air dispersed. Golden flames rose, and the Yuanying suddenly came out, riding on the wind and clouds. There was the sound of mountains and seas, and a crystal rainbow surrounded its body. Its body was bathed in 5 rays of light, and it shot out thousands of feet. Its face couldn't be looked at directly. As soon as they released the Yuanying, the color of the heaven and earth changed immediately. Dark clouds fell, and the mountain rain was coming. The thousands of disciples of the Lai Xian sect were forced by the raging hurricane to the point that they couldn't stand still. They had no choice but to retreat a few miles away. Just now, they were at ease. A few feet above the heads of the 3, there was stellar energy hovering. This qi was called cloud on the top. When a cultivator achieved Yuanying, one would grow. If it was refined by the extreme heavenly stellar energy, it would be able to resist thunder, fire, and poisonous wind. Not only could it be used to refine treasures, it could also be used to counter enemies. When there were 3 yang clouds, one would be able to enter the 2nd level of Yuanying. When a cultivator faced an enemy, they would often use this to determine the depth of their opponent's cultivation. Zhang Yan and Pang Yuzhong took the lead. There was only 1 stellar cloud circling around, and that Guomingda had already refined 2 stellar clouds. One of them even turned from illusion to reality, turning yin into yang. It was obvious that his cultivation was deep and not to be underestimated. However, when cultivators fought, they didn't only look at one's cultivation, but even more so at one's magical abilities. There were very few techniques in the world that possessed both cultivation and magical abilities, and the Great Mystery 5 Elements True technique that Zhang Yan deduced just so happened to be one of them. As soon as he attained the nascent soul realm, he had the confidence to fight two cultivators of the same generation. After Zhang Yan started yuaning, he thought that the two of them would definitely attack, so he wanted to be prepared and fight back. However, he saw that the two of them didn't make a move and instead chose to be on the defensive. He felt a little weird, thinking to himself that when the two of them fought, did they talk about the path of a gentleman? How would he know that the Central Pillar State wasn't like the East Flower State where monsters and demons gathered? Moreover, there weren't many sections. When disciples went out, they rarely fought with others. Although the Xian sect and Zhenluo alliance had fought each other for 20 years, the Yuanyin cultivators rarely showed their faces. However, nascent soul cultivators rarely showed their faces. Even if they did, they would avoid each other if their numbers were equal. Only when they had an absolute advantage would they attack together. Although Guomingda and Pang Yuzhong were Yuanyin cultivators, they had never fought to the death with cultivators of the same generation. They also weren't sure of Zhang Yan's methods, so they were on guard. They didn't want to win, but they didn't want to make any mistakes. Seeing that the two of them were being so careful, how could Zhang Yan be polite? He shouted and Yuanying looked down from above. He raised his finger and a ball of lightning fell down towards Pang Yuzhong. After reaching the nascent soul realm, a cultivator's attacks would no longer be restricted to the shape of the fiendish smoke. Every move they made would contain great power. This heavenly lightning was the accumulation of Zhang Yan's own magic power. If a person's magic power was vast and boundless, just one bolt of lightning would be enough to defeat the enemy. Pang Yuzhong saw that the lightning was rumbling and was coming at him fiercely. He didn't dare to be careless, and with a low shout he summoned his protective treasure light. A clear light rose from his feet and protected the surrounding 10 feet. When the lightning hit it, there was a loud bang and the treasure light shook nonstop. Pang Yuzhong made up his mind and squeezed the jade tablet in his hand. He secretly shook his hand and sent it straight towards Zhang Yan. This object was dark and gloomy. It flew out without a sound. It was extremely sinister. He originally wanted to deal with Zhang Yan the same way he dealt with Duanmu Mian, but he didn't expect that the sound of water would be so loud. The jade tablet didn't fly far before a blue light flashed past and disappeared. The connection between him and Zhang Yan's mind was cut off. He was shocked, but his reaction wasn't slow. He immediately took out another treasure from his sleeve. It was a golden bell the size of a fist. It was gilded with gold and hot silver, with auspicious patterns like dragons and phoenixes. He waved his hand and threw it into the air. He made a hand sign and was about to shake it when he saw a yellow light flash past and hit the bell. Gotcha! The bell was smashed into pieces. Pang Yuzhong was shocked and was about to take out another treasure when he saw the blue light rushing towards him. It collided with the protective treasure light and caused it to shake violently, almost dispersing. He was shocked and didn't care about making another move. He quickly used his strength to try to stabilize it. But right at this moment, the boundlessly thick yellow light descended once more, and it was like heavenly lightning striking down. Rumble! The treasured light was dispersed, and the aftershock didn't reduce in the slightest. It shook him on the cloud and caused him to somersault, causing him to feel dizzy and unable to stand up. Zhang Yan's attack was like a rainbow. It was fierce. In just one move, Pang Yuzhong couldn't fight back. Guomingda saw that the situation wasn't good and didn't dare to sit still. He raised his hand and took out the black net. A black light flew out and in a blink of an eye, it arrived above Zhang Yan's yuaning. The speed of its movement was incomparably fast. This treasure is called Beiqi net. Once it covers a cultivator, it can restrain their mana and trap them like a net. When fighting an enemy, it has never failed. Who would have thought that when this treasure came over, Zhang Yan didn't even pay attention to it? He waved his sleeve and suddenly a bright golden light flew out from Yuaning's back. It was about 100 zhang long and as thin as a gossamer. It was hard to see with the naked eye. It only flashed once, circled around and then disappeared. Guomingda's Beiqi net had already released a stream of air and covered Zhang Yan. He was delighted and felt that there was no suspense in taking this person down. He said, "Shitty, wait a moment and watch me take this person down." But after saying a few words, he didn't get a response. He couldn't help but look over in surprise, only to see Pang Yuzhong standing there in a daze, not moving at all. He suddenly felt that something was wrong and was about to ask again when he heard a loud cry. The upper half of Pang Yuzhong's body was actually cut off from his chest, splitting into two and falling down the cloud. Chapter 444. Please remember this website's domain name. Or at Guomingda saw that his shitty was suddenly defeated and died, and even his spirit was nowhere to be seen. Because he couldn't figure out what method Zhang Yan used, he couldn't help but panic. But he thought that his Bei Qi Luo had already restrained Zhang Yan, so he wouldn't retreat. He clenched his teeth and chanted the incantation. The black Luo Luo stream of air was like a bell. Following his incantation, it suddenly shrunk and closed in. Zhang Yan felt a huge force wrapping around him, as if it wanted to bind him and Yuaning together. He didn't panic, he laughed coldly and shook his shoulder. A green light rose from the Yuaning, blocking the Luo Luo. The green light expanded, like a branch, it grew continuously, and a crackling sound could be heard. In just a moment, it actually pushed open a gap in the Bei Qi Luo, preventing it from closing. When Guomingda saw this, he was also shocked. If he allowed him to push away this magical weapon, then the advantage he had would be wiped away. How would he dare to let him escape? He hurriedly used his incantation and incessantly activated his mana. The Bei Feng Luo trembled continuously and the airflow continued to drop down, one by one stretching out. The black fog covered the clouds and as soon as it was swept away, it continuously entangled with the inside. Zhang Yan saw that the pressure on his body suddenly increased. He wanted to use the wood elemental true light to push it away. But just as he was about to use his strength, his heart moved, he thought for a moment and retracted some of his strength. He only blocked it and didn't allow it to close in, but he also didn't struggle out. As a result, this battle became a battle of mana. Pang Mingda wasn't anxious at first, and even the situation before him was quite satisfactory. Facing the enemy, it was obvious that Zhang Yan's skills were better. But in his mind, this person was just now in the nascent soul stage, his skills were definitely not as deep as his own. After a long time, he would naturally be able to turn the situation around and easily gain the upper hand. But as time passed, he gradually felt that something was wrong. Zhang Yan was still calm and collected, not showing any signs of declining, but he felt short of breath and weak, somewhat unable to hold on. Of course, it was possible that Zhang Yan was deliberately mystifying things, but he didn't dare to gamble with his life. In particular, Zhang Yan was a cultivator from a major sect in the Donghua continent. He had often heard that the cultivators of this continent were powerful, which made him think even more highly of them. He could not help but feel nervous. If his spiritual power was really not as deep as this person's, then wouldn't he be in danger if he continued? This was also because the Middle Pillar State's cultivators lacked experience and their Dao hearts were not strong enough. They usually relied on external objects to obtain victory. If they were unable to take down their opponent even with a magic treasure, they would lose their confidence and be beaten back to their original state in an instant. They would be at a loss of what to do and no longer have confidence. If the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School were here, even if they lost all their magic treasures, they still dared to fight to the death. Another long time passed. The two were still in a stalemate. Pang Mingda already felt mentally and physically exhausted, and his spiritual power was severely depleted. Seeing that it was difficult to continue, he was also afraid and secretly complained, "Are all the cultivators of the Donghua continent this powerful? This person clearly only reached the nascent soul stage not long ago. How is he so powerful?" He thought that if this continued he would probably end up like his junior brother Pang Yuzhong. He could not help but feel anxious. He took out a few pills from his sleeve, but after swallowing them, he found that they could only hold on for a short while. The spiritual power of the Yuanian cultivators was immense. They fed on the essence of heaven and earth, and when fighting with others, they were constantly being depleted. The power of the pills was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. It could slightly replenish some spiritual energy, but it was impossible to use it to turn the situation around. The disciples watching the battle on both sides saw that he had already started to swallow the pills, and it was obvious that he was at a disadvantage. They were also anxious and wanted to go up and help. However, when the Yuanian cultivators fought, there were astral winds swirling on both sides. Those with lower cultivation were pushed away when they got a little closer, let alone go up and help. At this moment, no one realized that when Pang Yuzhong was killed, Hong An had retreated far away and sneaked into a corner where no one could see him. Then, regardless of the situation of the battle, he fled toward the outside of Kunyu without looking back. Not long after, he left the array and disappeared without a trace. When Guomingde came out, he wanted to leave quickly and return quickly. He did not think that he would stay outside for long, so he did not bring many pills with him. Not long after, he consumed all of them. After thinking about it, he made up his mind and shook his body. A thunderous sound was heard, and a cloud was shaken off from the top of the Yuanying. It slowly floated down, and when it touched his skin, it turned into essence and entered his body. This was the essence of his spiritual power, and it was tempered by astral winds, so it was extraordinary. With its nourishment, his originally depleted spiritual power was replenished. Guomingde's face turned pale, and then it turned red again. This cloud was broken, and he lost at least 100 years of cultivation. Although the middle pillar state was a place with a lot of spiritual resources, and he could cultivate it back in the future, he knew that with his lifespan he would not be able to step into the second stage of Yuaning. Even though he was able to harden his heart ached endlessly as well. He could only ceaselessly console himself. So long as he captured this person before him and seized the treasure back, when he returned to the sect, who else would be able to compare to his contributions? He would definitely be able to enjoy a lot of offerings. Different from the confused Guomingde, since the beginning of the fight, Zhang Yan was not in a hurry. He wanted to capture this person alive and interrogate him to solve a few doubts in his heart. This was to take the opportunity to consume the opponent's spiritual power so that it would be easier to capture him later. Before he made his move, he had already thought that if this person's cultivation was deep, or if he had some powerful trump card, then he would use the purple heaven thunder to open the way, and he would be able to escape unscathed. After a round of fighting, he was no longer afraid. Although this person's cultivation level was higher than his spiritual power was far from his. Even if the opponent cut off the cloud on top of his head, he would only be able to hold on for a little longer, and it was far from the point where he could turn defeat into victory. After a few hours, the sky darkened, and it was already night. Guomingde's expression was slightly tired, and there was some panic in his eyes. In his heart, he actually wanted to retreat. Actually, with the help of the cloud, his spiritual power was still far from reaching the point where he could not hold on any longer. At least he would have to fight for another night, and just now it was possible to see the outcome. Although he was Yuanying Zhenren, he was able to reach this stage because of the various magical treasures and the secret techniques of the sect. His mind and spirit were far from the tenacity of a cultivator like Zhang Yan, who relied purely on himself to fight. Before he fought with Zhang Yan, he had never fought for more than an hour. At this moment his body and mind were already very tired. It was rare for him to hold on until now. Moreover, Zhang Yan's calm and composed look gave him a great deal of pressure. His heart was heavy, and he was somewhat out of breath. Seeing that things could not be done, he thought of escaping again. He thought to himself, even if I obtain this treasure, it is not something I can use myself. I still have to hand it over to the sect. Why should I risk my life to fight? There are many disciples here that need my protection. Now that junior brother is gone, if I lose, where can they escape to? Magical treasures can be refined again, but a dead person cannot be resurrected. Why not take advantage of the fact that I still have some strength left and temporarily stop? In the future, when I call a few fellow sect members with high cultivation levels, I will find trouble with this person. He originally did not have the thought of the great Tao in his heart. He only wanted to live freely for hundreds or thousands of years and enjoy the riches and honor of the world. Now that he had not lived enough, how could he bear to throw away his life? Once these thoughts appeared, he no longer had the heart to continue fighting and only thought about how to escape. But even though he rarely fought with others, he knew that if he wanted to escape, he could not weaken his momentum. Instead, he had to suppress his opponent. Otherwise, if the opponent really counterattacked, it would really be difficult to resist. Therefore, he did not retreat but advanced instead. He gathered all the strength in his body and urged it repeatedly. This sorrowful Qi Luo suddenly increased in momentum. The black fog rolled, and it seemed like it was going to crush Zhang Yan in one fell swoop. The surrounding disciples' spirits were lifted, and their eyes lit up. Since Zhang Yan entered the path of Dao, he had encountered many cunning enemies. He had rich experience in fighting formations. Just from the opponent's small movements, he could see some clues. With a turn of his mind, he could guess what the opponent was thinking at this moment. He smiled and simply pushed the boat with the current. He purposely withdrew some of his mana. On the surface, it looked like he was being suppressed. Guomingda saw that his strategy was successful and couldn't help but be overjoyed. Just that at this moment, a moment of hesitation and doubt appeared in his heart. He only exerted a little pressure and this person seemed to be unable to hold on. If that was the case, could it be that this person was actually at the point where he was at the end of his rope? That expression on his face was just an act. Actually, if he exerted a little more, he would be able to take this person down? Once this thought appeared, he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he wanted to wait for a while and see the result. But he didn't know that this just happened to be within Zhang Yan's calculations. After a moment, Guomingda was shocked to find that not only was he unable to suppress the opponent, the battle situation was instead gradually returning to the original state. He had wasted a lot of mana for nothing. His original plan was not successful. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. This time he didn't have any thoughts of defeating the enemy, and once again activated his Fa Li, waiting for the Bei Qi Luo to show a little bit of power. He covered his head with the white smoke in his hand, creating a clear cloud light, bright as if it had been washed, glistening with blue water. After covering his body, he put away his yuanying, turned around and was about to leave. A cold smile appeared on Zhang Yan's face. He no longer suppressed the wood element true light. He released the restraint and allowed his mana to skyrocket. That green light qi immediately crept up and grew higher and higher. In an instant, that Bei Qi Luo exploded. Another flash of blue light swept that magical weapon away. Guomingda only felt a pain in his heart. Then a feeling of emptiness hit him. A salty taste surged up his throat. He didn't need to look back to know that his magical weapon was broken. At this moment he couldn't care less about the 1,000 over disciples. He only cared about himself and ran out. A ray of light flew out. Zhang Yan laughed heartily and stretched out his nascent soul, which transformed into a 300-meter-long hand that chased after Guomingda and his treasures. Zhang Yan's nascent soul laughed heartily and stretched out its hand. Guomingda was extremely shocked, and he hurriedly circulated his magic power. The protective smoky net shone brightly, and mist rose up to firmly resist the big hand. But since he was in Zhang Yan's hand, he was like a cornered beast. The huge hand kept on squeezing. In just a moment, Guomingda's mana was exhausted. An explosion was heard. The white smoke dispersed. His vision turned black and he lost consciousness. For the latest and fastest chapters, please log in. Reading is a pleasure. I suggest you keep it. Chapter 445. When Zhang Yan captured Guomingda, there was a commotion among the disciples who were watching from afar. Everyone was panic-stricken. In just a few hours, 2 of their masters had been defeated. How could they fight against him? The key was that Guomingda only cared about escaping just now and didn't have the time to check, so he didn't realize that Hongyan had already slipped away and was no longer here. Without him leading the way, it was impossible for them to leave the Kunyu Grand Formation safely unless they knew how to break the formation. When the thousands of disciples realized this, their hearts were filled with despair. Zhang Yan only needed a glance to know what had happened. Since he knew they couldn't escape, he didn't care about them. He just took the unconscious Guomingda and threw him at Lu Guo's feet, saying, "Fellow Taoist Lu, you can do whatever you want with this person. If you don't want to do it yourself, I can do it for you. But before that, can I ask a few questions?" Lu Guo looked at the unconscious Guomingda at his feet and knew that there was hope for revenge. He raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan with gratitude. His lips moved and he cupped his hands, saying, "Fellow Taoist Zhang." Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt that it was inappropriate and quickly changed his words. "Taoist Zhang, if you want to ask something, just ask it first." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He flicked his finger and a stream of fresh air entered Guomingda's nose. After a while, Guomingda slowly woke up. When he saw the situation in front of him and saw Lu Guo's hate-filled eyes, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Zhang Yan didn't avoid Lu Guo. He went straight to the point and said, "Fellow Taoist Guo, if you don't want to suffer, then tell me in detail what you know about the rare treasure. Otherwise, I will have many ways to torture you." Guomingda smiled bitterly and said, "I am meat on the chopping block. Since my life is in the hands of the two of you, please speak clearly. I will tell you everything I know." Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "I want to ask, what exactly is that treasure on the Turtle Snake Mountain?" Guomingda revealed a slightly surprised expression. He originally thought that Zhang Yan should have known what this treasure was. Otherwise, why would he fight with the two of them for this treasure? Moreover, Lu Guo was right next to him. Why didn't the main character ask him instead of asking him? In fact, although Lu Guo was the third master of the Haoxing Palace, she was simple-minded and unworldly. Duanmu Mian and Hong and were afraid that he would inadvertently leak the information, so they did not tell him the truth. What he knew was roughly the same as what he told Zhang Yan later. Zhang Yan didn't believe Duanmu Mian and Lu Guo's words either. When he was talking to Lu Guo earlier, he already had the intention to test her. He already knew that she didn't understand the real situation. Later, when he saw the treasure, he made some guesses. However, he wasn't completely sure, which was why he asked this question. Guomingda was silent for a while. Just now said slowly, "I only know that this is an ancient divine beast's egg. As for the specifics, I don't know." Lu Guo finally understood the truth. He was stunned for a while, then he went into a trance and muttered something to himself. Suddenly, he raised his head and pointed at Guomingda angrily. "I see. No wonder your Lai Xian sect wants to snatch this item." Guomingda sighed and said, "Taoist Lu, I'm sorry." He said, "Fellow Lu, I'm sorry. Although my Lai Xian sect has been around for more than 500 years, it seems like a long time. In fact, compared to those sects that have been around for thousands of years, our foundation is shallow. When the Shaoqing sect comes to attack us again, most of the time, we will disperse. However, if there is a divine beast protecting the sect, not only can we defend against external enemies, but we can also stabilize fate. I was entrusted by the sect to do this for the hundreds of thousands of sect members." Zhang Yan listened and nodded his head slightly. What he said was not far from what he had guessed. However, he was familiar with the scriptures and came from the Qinsong school, a sect that had been around for thousands of years. Regardless of knowledge, Guomingda couldn't be compared to him. In his heart, there was actually another conclusion. Then he asked a few more questions about the Lai Xian sect. Guomingda didn't hide anything and told him everything. In fact, he didn't think that what Zhang Yan asked was any secret. Even if it was the sect's Taoist books, if Zhang Yan asked, he would still tell him. In the cultivation of Tao in the Central Pillar continent, techniques were secondary. Only external objects were fundamental. These were firmly controlled by the three major sections. No matter how high one's aptitude was, no matter how good one's comprehension was, if one didn't cultivate external objects, one wouldn't be able to achieve anything. Only those who came from the major clans had the qualifications to cultivate to the upper realm. In the royal family of the Song country, there were many disciples of the royal family who entered the sect. It could be said that the power of the secular world in this continent and the cultivation sects were inseparable and merged into one. As for the Zhenluo alliance, it was originally a loose alliance formed by the cultivators of the various continents who were unwilling to be restricted by others. They didn't open their doors to accept disciples. Even if they obtained external objects, they would use them for their own use. The people in this alliance mostly thought for their own family. Because of this, although they had a lot of people, they were still no match for the Lai Xian sect. After Zhang Yan found out everything he wanted to know, he took a step back and said to Lu Guo, "Fellow cultivator Lu, I have finished my questions. If you want to take revenge, you can start now." Lu Guo took a deep breath and walked forward. Seeing the hatred in her eyes, Guomingda knew that he wouldn't be able to escape. His face turned pale and he sighed softly. He closed his eyes and waited for death. Lu Guo snorted and raised her hand. Just as he was about to make his move, he heard a pleasant voice say, "Taoist Lu, please stay your hand." He turned around and realized that the one who spoke was the girl who said that she wanted to turn him into a strong man. The girl came forward and bowed. She said seriously, "Taoist Lu, before you make your move, can you listen to me for a moment?" Lu Guo didn't want to listen, but he was kind by nature. He stood still and said stiffly, "Speak." The girl bowed to him again and said, "Taoist Lu, you also know that Pingdong is divided into 3 parts. The Lai Xian sect has one of them. My name is Bai Ran. My Bai family is a big clan in the southeast. We have a few words in the sect. If you are willing to let my master go, I am willing to offer all the treasures in the clan for you to enjoy." Lu Guo snorted and said angrily, "The revenge of killing my brother is absolutely irreconcilable. There is no room for discussion. Don't talk anymore. I will not let this old thief go. I don't want your things. Go away, I am going to make my move." Bai Ran took 2 steps forward and stood closer to Lu Guo. She said softly, "Why is Taoist brother so stubborn? The dead are already dead. Even if you take revenge for him, can you bring him back to life? Moreover, Taoist brother killed my master. How can you escape the revenge of the Lai Xian sect? Why do you have to sacrifice your life for this? My daughter is willing to use the power of the clan to help Taoist brother cultivate. Isn't this good?" Lu Guo said stubbornly, "I don't care. Moreover, who knows if what you said is true or false? Go away, go away." As she said this, she was already waving her hand to chase her away. Bai Ran bit her lips and said softly, "If Taoist brother is afraid that I will go back on my words, I am willing to serve you with my body. I will always be by your side and swear a curse. What do you think?" As soon as she said this, she leaned forward and gently pressed her soft and delicate body against Lu Guo's. In an instant, her already pretty face blushed, making her look even more beautiful. Lu Guo had cultivated for more than 300 years and had never taken a step out of Kunyu. Moreover, she had never encountered such a situation. She was immediately dumbfounded. She pushed Bai Ran with both hands and took a few steps back. Her face was flushed and she couldn't say a word. Zhang Yan looked on indifferently from the side and didn't say anything to disturb her. He captured this person just for the divine beast egg. As long as Lu Guo fulfilled his promise, he would let her make her own decision. Even if he couldn't resist the temptation and released Guomingda, he would let him make his own decision. He wouldn't stop her. After a while, Lu Guo's emotions calmed down. He was a cultivator after all and had already regained his composure. He said in a deep voice, "Lady Bai, go away. Brother treats me like a father. If I don't take revenge, how can I be a human? No matter what you say, the result will be the same. Don't waste your breath." After saying this, he suddenly turned around and decisively took action. With just a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of smoke flew out and hit Guomingda's forehead. With a poochie sound, it pierced through Guomingda's skull. With another wave of his sleeve, Bai Ran covered her mouth and screamed in shock. Guomingda's primordial spirit was destroyed. This person no longer existed in this world. After doing all this, Lu Guo let out a long sigh. With a face full of tears, he said to Tianyan, "Eldest senior brother, I have taken revenge for you. Unfortunately, that despicable Hong'an has escaped. But don't worry, no matter where he runs to, even if he has to search the 9 continents, I will definitely take his head back and place it in front of the ancestral tablets." Zhang Yan looked at him and slowly walked in front of him. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, I took the treasure from your temple without permission. I hope you don't hold a grudge against me. Lu Gua turned around, cupped her hands, and bowed deeply to Zhang Yan. She sighed and said, Zhenren Zhang, I also understand that if this treasure was placed in a small path, it would be impossible to protect it. Eldest senior brother's cultivation was more than 10 times higher than mine, but didn't he still lose his life? We have been here for more than 300 years, but we still couldn't break the formation. Once Taoist Zhang arrived, he obtained this treasure. It can be seen that this item is fated with Taoist Zhang. Now that Taoist Zhang has taken revenge for me, according to what you said earlier, this item should belong to Taoist Zhang. Why would I hold a grudge against you? Zhang Yan nodded and praised, fellow Taoist Lu is indeed a man of his word. The reason why he spent so much effort was that he inexplicably felt that this divine beast's egg was very important. Whether he stole it openly or secretly, he was afraid that there would be great karma involved. However, as long as he fulfilled his promise and obtained the vast Xing Taoist palace disciples' promise to give it to him, there would be no more entanglements. From then on, it would belong to him, and he no longer had to worry about it. At this moment, Lu Gua bowed deeply and said, Taoist Zhang, there is something that I don't know if I should say. Zhang Yan was in a good mood, so he smiled and said, fellow Taoist Zhang, there is something that I don't know if I should say. Lu Gua looked embarrassed. He pointed to the 1,000 disciples and said, these people are here on orders from the sect. They are not unforgivable evildoers. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life, so I have the intention to let them go. However, I am afraid that the Lai Xian sect will find out about this and implicate you, so I feel very uneasy. Zhang Yan smiled and said, since fellow Taoist Lu has a kind heart, why would I be stingy to help you? As for implicating me, you are worrying too much. I destroyed a branch of the Lai Xian sect in the past, so I have already offended them. Just now that I have become a nascent soul, I am worried that I can't find an opponent to test my sword on. If they want to cause trouble then just come. After achieving Yuanying, one could go to the extreme heaven and fly with the help of the astral winds. It was not difficult to travel tens of thousands of miles in a day. If one wanted to catch up, they would have to be Yuanying Zhenren as well. However, those people from the Lai Xian sect had similar skills to him. If they were alone, they might not have the guts to seek revenge. As for those with profound skills, he also wanted to fight them. Since he had the flying starry palace, he was not afraid even if he was besieged. Lu Gua couldn't help but show envy in his eyes. At Zhang Yan's level of cultivation, other than the cultivators in the 3rd stage of Yuanying and the people from the heavens abode, there were not many people who could do anything to him. He could really be said to be unrestrained and unrestrained. Chapter 446. Author's Note. Today, the thousands of Lai Xian sect's disciples were finally sent out of Kunyu by Lu Gua. With Zhang Yan, a great nascent soul cultivator, watching from the side, no one dared to have any wild thoughts. They all obediently retreated from this place, and then, as if they were escaping from a disaster, they flew towards the nearest branch of the Lai Xian sect. In these 20 years, the Lai Xian sect had built a few branches in Pingxi. Although the Zhenluo League had retreated deep into the mountains, they did not lose much of their power. If they showed the slightest weakness, there was no guarantee that they would not return. Thus, every branch was carefully managed. This actually restrained half of Lai Xian sect's power from top to bottom. As a result, Pingdong's base was much weaker. The Lai Xian sect would not maintain such a situation for long. Their main goal was to get the divine beast's egg. After obtaining it, they would pretend to be defeated and slowly withdraw all their forces back to Pingdong. In this way, it would seem that they had suffered a great loss, but in fact, they had secretly obtained a divine beast that could suppress the destiny of others. However, when these thousands of disciples returned, they brought back a shocking news. 2 nascent soul cultivators were killed, and they were killed by a single person. Lai Xian sect sent a total of 5 Yuanying Zhenren to Pingxi. In addition to the protection of the ancestral master's statue and tens of thousands of disciples, this was already an extremely powerful force. Although it was not enough to attack, It was more than enough to guard the branch. However, now that 2 people were gone, they were stretched thin. As Zhang Yan had expected, after knowing about this, the remaining 3 Jinren did not show any intention of finding trouble with him. Firstly, these people had killed 2 people, so Zhang Yan was wary of them. They did not have the confidence to win and were afraid that they would get themselves into trouble. Secondly, after the death of the 2 nascent soul cultivators, the strength of the Lai Xian sect in Pingxi had been greatly reduced. They believed that this situation would soon be discovered by the Zhenluo Union, and it was hard to guarantee that they would not launch a large-scale counterattack. Right now, they could only take care of themselves. Therefore, other than sending a letter to the main altar to wait for a decision, they did not take any action. A month later, on the peak of Turtle Snake Mountain, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged with the divine beast egg placed in front of him. Divine beasts were born when they sensed the essence of heaven and earth. It was unknown how the Almighty Senior from the vast Movement Dao Palace obtained this egg, but he placed it here because he wanted to absorb the essence of the sun, moon, and stars from the sky, as well as the Xianqing Qi, to give birth to a little spirit. However, this was only the first step. Now that the embryo had not formed, what exactly was the divine beast was actually uncertain. The central pillar continent was located in the middle of the 9 continents. None of the spirits of the 4 directions could gain the upper hand. Therefore, although it had sufficient vital energy, it was still not able to take form. It still needed to be brought to any direction in the north, south, east, west, or west. Only then would it be able to sense the stars above and receive the energy of the earth below. In other words, whether or not the divine beast's egg could be nurtured in the end and what kind of spirit it would give birth to completely depended on where Zhang Yan brought it down to. However, in the past month, when Zhang Yan used his heart to sense, he found that the egg was chaotic and empty. He couldn't help but frown. If this little bit of innate spirit had not been born, it would be useless even if he took it. He would need to absorb the essence of heaven and earth here and wait for the opportunity to come. No one knew if this wait would last for 1,000 or 10,000 years. Should he just give up? However, when he formed his nascent soul, he clearly felt a bit of spirituality resonating with him. Although this feeling was fleeting, he didn't ignore it. He pondered for a while and decided to try a few more times. If it really didn't work, he could only bring it back to his cave abode and think about other things. At this moment, he suddenly heard a clear and melodious sound from the foot of the mountain. When Zhang Yan heard it, he raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Is that Zhong Exen? Come up and talk." The little Taoist boy Zhong Exen came up the mountain path and saw Zhang Yan. He knelt down from afar and said, "Spiritual Master Zhang, Master requests an audience." Now that this little servant had lost his master, he was much more well-behaved. When Zhang Yan turned his eyes, Zhong Exen immediately lowered his head and didn't dare to look at him. After Duanmu Mian and Hong En left, Lu Gua took over the position of the Haoxing Palace's monastery master. Because this place was close to the extreme heaven, it was convenient for cultivation. Therefore, Zhang Yan stayed here to stabilize his cultivation. He pondered for a while and nodded, "Invite monastery master Lu up." Zhong Exen felt like he was pardoned and left in a panic. A short while later, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Lu Gua stepped forward and bowed to Zhang Yan. He seemed to want to say something, but his lips moved a little, but he stopped himself. Looking at his embarrassed expression, Zhang Yan couldn't help but laugh. "Taoist Lu, did you encounter something difficult?" Lu Gua stomped his feet and sighed. "These few days, there are many cultivators outside the mountain. From the looks of it, they seem to be from the Lai Xian order. This Kuan Island is protected by a big formation. I'm not afraid, but I think that Hong En is also outside. If he attracts more people, it doesn't matter if I live or die, but if the sect is destroyed, it won't be enough to redeem myself." Zhang Yan looked at him with a faint smile and said, "Taoist Lu, do you want I to stay a little longer?" Lu Gua's face turned red. He did think so, but he was too embarrassed to say it directly. Now that Zhang Yan exposed him, he felt awkward and quickly explained, "Jinren Zhang, I just want to set up a formation in order to block the enemy. Even if Hong En comes, I'm not afraid." However, this will take a few months to set up. During this time, I'm afraid that the Lai Xian order will take the opportunity to attack, so I want Jinren to stay here. Jinren, don't worry, I won't trouble you for nothing. He hurriedly reached into his sleeve and took out a jade plate. He held it up with both hands and presented it to Zhang Yan. He said, "This is something that Duanmu Shixiang obtained many years ago. It's called the Vitality Protecting Evil Crystal. It was originally prepared by De Shixiang to restore his power. But before the time was right, he already..." At this point, he paused and shook his head, saying, "If Jinren agrees, I'm willing to offer this item." Vitality Evil Crystal? Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. This fiend crystal was a rare external object that was condensed from earth vein infernal qi. It was able to help nascent soul cultivators improve their cultivation, and its effects were very strange. Although he had heard of it before because it was rare, he had never seen it before. At this moment, there were dozens of jade crystals neatly arranged on the jade plate in Lu Guo's hand. This vast Qing Daoist palace was only a remote small sect, but it could take out so many of them at once. It was obvious that the middle pillar state was rich in resources. He couldn't help but think that every year, the middle pillar state would send many such good items to the Shaoqing sect. It was equivalent to using the land of a continent to worship a sect. How could the Shaoqing sect not be strong? Zhang Yan originally wanted to stay here for a few more days. Since the treasure was in front of him, he didn't stand on ceremony and went with the flow, saying, "If that's the case, I will accept it." Lu Guo was relieved and happily cupped her hands, saying, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Taoist Lu, I have to return to the sect eventually. In I's opinion, it's not appropriate for you to fight against the Lai Xian sect alone. Why don't you find someone else to help you?" Lu Guo was stunned for a moment and then sincerely asked, "Jinren Zhang, please show me the way." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's not really a way. You can go to the Zhenluo League and you will definitely gain something." Lu Guo slapped his forehead and suddenly said, "That's right. The Zhenluo League and the Lai Xian sect are enemies now. You can go there and ask for help. Thank you for reminding me, otherwise I wouldn't have thought of it." He had lived in Kunyu for more than 300 years. Whenever something happened, he would solve it on his own. He never thought of going outside the mountain to ask for help. Now that Zhang Yan understood, he immediately understood. After thanking him profusely, he left the mountain. As soon as Lu Guo left, Zhang Yan waved his hand and the dozens of vitality-protecting evil crystals flew up and floated in front of him. Each of them was the length of a finger and the thickness of a chopstick. There were strands of silver shavings circling around them like flying stars and fireflies. It was extremely beautiful. He thought for a moment and said, "There's no point in keeping this item. I might as well refine it now." Therefore, he didn't keep it. He waved his sleeve and a strong thunder flew out. With a crackling sound, it shattered the crystal on the spot and turned into countless sparkling dust that filled the mountain peak. He opened his mouth and sucked in like a whale sucking in water, absorbing all the stardust into his body. After that, he closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing for a moment. After 2 hours, the cloud above him trembled slightly. The cloud that was originally misty like a cloud seemed to have become slightly more solid, but when he silently observed it, there seemed to be no change. Zhang Yan also knew that when one reached the Yuanying realm, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Therefore, he didn't mind it. He collected his thoughts and calmed his mind. He once again looked at the chaotic embryo. This time, he didn't know if it was because of his luck or some other reason. Not long after, he suddenly felt a weak spiritual sense. He just touched it slightly and then it disappeared. He wanted to look for it again, but he couldn't feel it anymore. However, Zhang Yan's spirit was greatly lifted. At this moment, he could confirm that the embryo had given birth to a spirit. In this way, he didn't need to wait for thousands of years. However, what kind of divine beast he would nurture it into was still a matter of discussion. Zhang Yan calculated in his heart and finally made up his mind. Since it was obtained from the Tortoise Snake Mountain, and the Dark Azure sect was located in the north, above the great pool of Dragon Abyss, they could borrow the water from the north to nurture it, and they could also take care of it at the same time. In reality, if he wanted to shorten the time of nurturing, the best choice was to head to the northern darkness continent and find a suitable place. However, that was the place where the monsters resided. If Chinsong's school was at its peak, he didn't need to think too much. He just needed to go and no one from the 8 monster divisions would dare to come out. However, it was different now. Once he brought the embryo there, the monster division might sense it. That would be too dangerous and he might be surrounded and attacked. Zhang Yan thought about it. If his cultivation reached the elephant realm and he became a heaven-enlightened master, he could try to charge in. However, he could only take a step back. After he returned, he would place it in the clear nether sky lake. After a long time, he would be able to succeed. Thus, he waved his sleeves and put the embryo away. After this matter was done, he thought about it. There were still 11 years until the sword battle between the 16 sections. It seemed like a long time, but it was actually just a short moment. He wanted to use this period of time to cultivate a few more techniques so that he could fight against the heroes of the 16 sections. Especially the 5-element escape technique. Not only could it trap and block enemies, but it could also allow him to fly and hide. It would be a great help to him and he had to study it well. Although it wasn't easy to cultivate this technique, he had the Taishan 5-element true technique as his foundation and the broken jade. It could be said that the 2 biggest hurdles had been crossed and he didn't have to worry about it like other cultivators. Cultivating it wouldn't be too difficult. Chapter 447. Zhang Yan was already a Yuanian cultivator. It was still okay for him to cultivate his abilities, but his improvement in spiritual energy was slow. Only by heading to the extreme heaven to absorb the Gang Ing and train in Yuaniing could he improve his cultivation. Thinking about this, he had a sudden urge. With a clear roar, he leaped up and turned into a beam of light. He broke through the extreme heaven and instantly arrived above the Gang Phone. He stood on it and looked around. The sky was wide and the sea was wide. The air was clear and bright, the sea of clouds was boundless, rolling and surging, it was boundless, it gave one a feeling of flying freely, even one's chest felt relaxed. He looked around and saw that there were still many Qingyang Gang Ing that hadn't dissipated. They were floating around with the Gang Qi. With a thought, he raised his hand and waved. He sucked some of it up and tried to refine and absorb it. However, as soon as it entered his body, he felt an uncontrollable force rushing into his body. It was extremely uncomfortable and it took him a while to completely refine it. He nodded his head and thought to himself, as expected. Before this, he was confused. This Qingyang Gang Ing was considered a high-grade Gang Ing, so why didn't he see other Yuanian cultivators coming to find it? Now that he tried it out, he understood. The Azure Yang Polaris came from beyond the heavens, and it contained extreme Yang Qi. Without the help of the heroic knot fish drum, it would not be easy for ordinary nascent soul cultivators to absorb it, and they would need to slowly refine it. Rather than wasting time here, why not go to other places to find Gang Ing? Even if the Yuanian cultivators got it, they would use it to refine pills and weapons. They rarely used it to cultivate, so of course they wouldn't purposely search for it. Zhang Yan spread his sleeves and sat on the cloud. Just as he was about to circulate his energy to cultivate, a thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. Before he left, the sect leader said that if he used the hero drum, it might attract the disciples of that person to find trouble with him. The sect leader wouldn't talk about this for no reason. Therefore, he remembered what the sect leader said. He was also very cautious in case the sect leader suddenly appeared and interrupted his cultivation. However, in the past 28 years, nothing out of the ordinary happened. This was a little unusual. The most likely explanation was that the central pillar state wasn't the territory of that fiend and his disciple. Due to the distance, they couldn't sense it. However, among the 9 continents, only the central pillar continent was the most suitable for recuperation. Moreover, it did not lack external materials for cultivation, nor did it have anyone with a high cultivation base. It could be said to be blessed by the heavens. It was like a barren land. Although he had hidden far away in the desolate wilderness, He did not know how long it would take for him to regain his original cultivation. Besides that, there was another possibility, and that was that the disciples of that ferocious man had noticed the existence of the heroic knot-fish drum. But for some reason he didn't care. Thinking about it this way, it did make some sense. Ever since that fierce man was severely injured, he must still be in seclusion, and his disciple has lost his greatest backer. Perhaps they were still worried that Chinsong school would come to deal with them, so they did not dare to act rashly. This was also reasonable. However, Zhang Yan still did not dare to let his guard down. For the time being, it was the latter possibility. If the other party really intended to make a move, they would definitely not let him leave so easily. During those 28 years, when he was cultivating, Kuan Island was just a few steps away. He could hide in the formation at any time to avoid the calamity. If it was him, he wouldn't be in a rush to make a move either. Instead, he would hide at the side and wait for the right opportunity. He thought that if there was such a strong enemy watching from the side, then he had to be careful, especially since he knew nothing about his opponent. He couldn't be careless. Thus, with a single thought, he released the star's sword orb. With a twist of his technique, it turned into 8 rays of sword light and dispersed in all directions. It only stopped after traveling 1,000 feet away. This way, if there were any strange signs, he could warn them in advance and make preparations in advance. 600 miles away from Kuan Island, there was a majestic Tsang mountain. 2 people were sitting in an abandoned temple in the belly of the mountain, drinking with each other. One of them had blonde hair and golden eyebrows. He had a broad chest and a broad back. He was 6 feet tall and wore an apricot robe. A wine jar was held in his hand, and it looked as small as an ordinary cup. The person opposite him was about the same size as him. Behind his head was a clump of black hair that stood up like steel needles. However, his lips and teeth were protruding, and his face was ugly. At this moment, he kept pouring wine into his mouth. When he was drunk, he pulled down the front of his robe, revealing his chest full of black hair. He looked extremely ferocious. The man gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine, then shook his head and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, it's a pity that the 2 of us can't go to such a rich place and miss out on many wonderful things. I heard that Junior Marshal Sister Dan is very happy. She has more than 100 fair-skinned and beautiful boys and girls in her backyard. I don't know what she does all day long." Senior Marshal Brother Jean heard the regret and envy in his voice. He laughed and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, among the 3 of us, only Junior Marshal Sister Shan looks like a human. She is also a Qi Dao cultivator. She can sneak into the Zhen Luo alliance. If it were the 2 of us, we would know that she is a demon just by looking at her appearance. How could we do anything then?" Junior Marshal Brother Zhao threw the wine jar in his hand and suddenly howled to the sky, as if he was releasing the resentment in his heart. His voice rumbled and echoed throughout the valley. Senior Marshal Brother Jean didn't stop him. After venting his anger, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao just now stopped and said with hatred, "When we were under Demon Lord Luo, although we weren't his trusted subordinates, we had a comfortable life. We could do whatever we wanted, and when we were free, we could even catch 2 young girls to change our tastes. LV Junyang only entered the sect earlier than us, so what right does he have to control us? We can't do this, we can't do that, and we can only drink wine once a month. It's so depressing." Senior Marshal Brother Jin's expression changed and he shouted, "Junior Marshal Brother, shut up. Eldest Marshal Brother is not someone you can slander. If you want to die, don't drag me down with you." After being scolded by Senior Marshal Brother Jean, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao seemed to sober up a little. The words just now blurted out without much thought. Thinking about that person's methods, he broke out in a cold sweat. He looked to his left and right with a guilty conscience. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, it's a slip of the tongue." Senior Marshal Brother Jin's expression softened and he advised, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, ever since we became Master's disciples, we've received the blood essence of a great demon that Master found, allowing our cultivation to improve. Master's kindness to us is greater than the heavens. What's a mere restriction? When we were under Demon Lord Luo, you and I were just idle demon kings. Even though we were happy, when disaster came, didn't we abandon our cave and escape? Now, we can be considered to have entered Taoism. When Master returns to Qinsong in the future and takes the position of sect leader, we won't be considered as people without roots. Even if we reincarnate and cultivate, we can be guided by Master. Even if we become immortals, who knows if we can't do it? Junior Marshal Brother Zhao curled his lips and said, "Such a good thing, old Zhao, dare not think about it. As long as we live free and happy, it's fine." Senior Marshal Brother Jean, can't you see that eldest Marshal Brother is polite to the three of us on the surface, but in reality he doesn't care about us. Right now, we're still useful, but if there's a day when we return to Qinsong school, Senior Marshal Brother Jean shook his head and said, "Since the three of us entered the sect, we haven't achieved anything. Instead, we've only benefited from Master. It's no wonder that eldest Marshal Brother doesn't care about us. But now is our chance. If we can take down this person and take that magical weapon back, let's see who will look down on us in the future." Junior Marshal Brother Zhao laughed and said, Old Zhao, don't think that Zhang Yan is easy to deal with. This person is one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong School. Although he ranks 9th, his cultivation is now on par with us. I heard that his Taoist techniques are strange, and I'm afraid that he has many magical weapons. If we want to deal with him, I don't think it will be easy. Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked over and deliberately provoked him, saying, "From what eldest Marshal Brother said, someone who can wield the heroic knot fish drum must be someone that sect leader Qin trusts. If he's easy to deal with, there's no need for the three of us to go together." "What's wrong, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao? Are you afraid?" Junior Brother Zhao burped and shook the hair on the back of his head. He said, "Senior Brother Jean, ever since you became Master's disciple, you've become more cunning. If you were to say this to Sister Shan, it would be more meaningful. You're a golden retriever, so you don't like my temper." Senior Marshal Brother Jean was embarrassed by the fact that Junior Marshal Brother Jean had pointed out his weakness and was now being stabbed in the back. However, he remembered that the three of them needed to work together, so he endured it. He thought to himself, "Right now, Master is more important. I won't bother with a stupid and dirty pig like you. When we get back, see how I'll make things difficult for you." Junior Marshal Brother Zhao complained for a long time, then he lay down on the ground and fell asleep. His mouth was mumbling something, and from time to time, he would raise his hand to swat away the flies that had smelled the fishy stench. He rolled back and forth, and before long, he was extremely dirty. Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked at him with disdain. He rolled up his sleeves and walked to the other side. He picked a clean spot and sat down, as if he was ashamed to be associated with Junior Marshal Brother Zhao. After 2 hours, a red mist suddenly appeared on the horizon along with the wind, mixed with a bit of peach blossom petals. With a flash of pink light, a beautiful woman stood in front of him. She had a slender waist and voluptuous breasts. She was enchanting and had a pair of limpid eyes that seemed to contain boundless affection. Beside her, there was a fat Taoist. His small eyes kept moving around, as if he had a lot of thoughts in his mind. Senior Marshal Brother Jean was overjoyed. He stood up and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Shan, you're here." He then looked at the fat Taoist and asked, "Are you Hongen?" Hongen bowed and said, Yes, I am." Greetings to the the 3 Taoists. Junior Marshal Brother Zhao had also sobered up. He stared at Hongen with red eyes and muttered to himself, "This fella is fat and full of oil. It's a good match for wine." Hongen was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He knelt down in front of Lady Shan and said with a sad face, "Taoist Shan, you promised me that you would spare my life." Lady Shan giggled and said in a flirtatious manner, "Taoist Hong, you are too timid. Senior Marshal Brother Zhao was just joking with you." Senior Marshal Brother Jean did not have the patience to argue with him. He said in a deep voice, "Hongen, since you are the second temple master of the vast Qingdao Palace, you must know how to enter the array. Hurry up and tell me. If there are any mistakes, I will send you to Junior Marshal Brother Zhao as food." Hongen didn't dare to hide anything and told them the methods to enter the formation. However, he kept an eye out for them. The method to leave the formation was different from the method to enter the formation. They were two different methods. He only told them the method to enter the formation but not the method to leave it. In this way, it would be fine if the three of them won, but if they lost, they would definitely die in the formation. They wouldn't have to come out and vent their anger on him. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 448. Hong-in also felt that he was unlucky. Initially, when he saw that the situation was not right, he escaped from Kuan-yu. Because he did not dare to return to the Lai Xian Sex Division, he went to the Zhenluo League. Later, when he heard that Guo and Pang were killed by Zhang Yan, he was secretly glad that he had acted early. The Zhenluo League had its own people. If he did not have a backer, it would be difficult for him to survive. But his cultivation level was not high, and he had some good things on him, but he gave them to Guo and Pang, two people. He had nothing on him, so it was difficult for him to make friends with people of the same Dao, so no one took him seriously. Later on, this beautiful Lady Shan took the initiative to recruit him. She was Jinren Yuaning, and Hong-in just now came here to curry favor with her. He did not expect that she wanted to return to Kuan-yu, so he had no choice but to come here. After explaining the method to enter the formation in detail, Hong-in said with a fawning expression, "You too, I have told you the method, can you let me go?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked at him coldly and said, "Did you really tell me everything?" Hong-in felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast when he was stared at by the ferocious glint in his eyes. His entire body quivered as he said, "Allow me to think again, think again." Senior Marshal Brother Jean snorted and said, "Then go to the side and think about it." He could be sure that what Hong-in said was the truth, but he always felt that he was hiding something. Furthermore, he did not intend to keep this person alive. After he returned, he was prepared to send this person to Zhao Xiong as rations. Hong-in went to the side and realized that his back was wet and cold. He was sure that he did not make any mistakes. But he couldn't help feeling guilty and secretly cursed. "Looking at the three of you, you must be some kind of demon. How do you know how powerful that priest Zhang is? Even Guo and Pang were not his match. What kind of ability do you have? I want to see how you die." Senior Marshal Brother Jean called Junior Marshal Brother Zhao and Lady Shan in front of him and said seriously, "Since Senior Marshal Brother has handed this matter to us, we must do it well and not make any mistakes. Even their reputation is going to be ruined." Lady Shan cast a glance at Junior Brother Zhao and reprimanded him bluntly, "Zhao Xiong, when you make your move later, don't just stand there and do nothing. If you can't take care of this person, don't worry about Senior Brother Jean making things difficult for you. I will not let you off first." Zhao Xiong snorted and said unhappily, "Sister Shan, you're so unreasonable. Our old Zhao am not as unbearable as you say." Lady Shan sneered, "That's good. Let's get down to business. Senior Marshal Brother Zhao, don't say one thing and do another. Put away your old habits." It won't be too late to act presumptuously after defeating this person. Zhao Xiong stared at Lady Shan for a while. He squinted his eyes and chuckled. He rubbed his hands and said, "If Lady Shan allows me to kiss her, old Zhao will work hard. Definitely not ambiguous." Lady Shan hesitated for a moment, then smiled coquettishly, glanced at him and said, "Senior Brother Zhao, if you really want to help me, it's not impossible." Zhao Xiong was elated. He patted his chest loudly and said, "All right," he said. "Let's see what old Zhao can do later. I didn't train my tough skin for nothing." Senior Marshal Brother Jean saw that Lady Shan managed to pacify Zhao Xiong with just a few words and heaved a sigh of relief. Based on his estimation, it would still be difficult for two people to deal with Zhang Yan. However, if the three of them worked together, there would be no chance of failure. With Lady Shan's promise, Senior Marshal Brother Zhao felt hot all over. He could not wait to press this woman to the ground and vent his anger. Thus, he asked impatiently, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, when do we make our move?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean said, "Junior Marshal Brother, don't be anxious. It's a bad idea for the three of us to rush into Kunyu and attack. Who knows if Zhang Yan will have his guard up? We need to wait for an opportunity. Zhao Xiong said impatiently, How long do we have to wait? Senior Marshal Brother Jin said, Kunyu is below the extreme heaven and there are no earth fiend essence veins there. This Zhang Yan is a Yuanian cultivator. Is he not going to come out to cultivate? Once he goes above the extreme heaven, it'll be our chance. Zhao Xiong scratched his head and came to a realization. You're right. Senior Marshal Brother, are you saying that we should set up an ambush above the extreme heaven? Senior Marshal Brother Jin chuckled and said, We're going to set up an ambush above the extreme heaven, but it'll be you and Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Zhao Xiong was stunned. He asked, Then where are you going, Senior Marshal Brother? Senior Marshal Brother Jin smiled and said, I'm going to enter Kunyu and hide there, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Zhao Xiong was confused. What kind of strategy is this? Senior Marshal Brother Jin chuckled and explained, I heard that this Zhang Yan is also a very scheming person. Back then, he was the one who used the North Dark Sword to injure my master. Such a powerful person, using normal methods to deal with him will be useless. Therefore, we have to use a surprise attack to defeat him. My strategy is to have the two of you attack together when he is at a critical point in his cultivation. Don't use any tricks to suppress him. At the same time, you have to make him think that many cultivators are coming to attack him together. This way, he will have the intention to retreat and return to the Kunyu formation. Lady Shan's eyes turned and she laughed. She said, I already know what Senior Marshal Brother is planning. That Zhang Yan doesn't know that we have already entered the formation. Once he returns to the formation, he will think that he is protected by the formation and will relax. At this time, Senior Marshal Brother Jin will attack from the side and catch him off guard. Even if we can't kill him, we will be able to injure him severely. Senior Marshal Brother Jin laughed and said, Lady Shan is indeed smart. When the time comes, the two of you can enter the formation and help me. Then we will be able to kill this person. Zhao Xiong didn't care. Since the two of them had agreed, then it was fine. He said, You guys decide. Do what you need to do. I will do my best when the time comes. But when exactly are we going to do it? Senior Marshal Brother Jin said, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, don't worry. I still have a few things to tell Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Zhao Xiong couldn't be bothered to listen to what the two of them had to say. He swayed the mane behind his head and went to sleep. Not long after, snoring sounds could be heard. Senior Marshal Brother Jin cupped his hands and said, Sister Shan from the Shan clan is the best at hiding. I have a favor to ask of you. I'll have to trouble you to wait at the high heaven realm and see when Zhang Yan comes out and returns to the mountain every day. When you find out, we'll make our move. Lady Shan praised, I accept your order. Senior Marshal Brother Jin's way of doing things is indeed very methodical. She hesitated for a while and asked, Senior Marshal Brother, are you confident in dealing with that Zhang Yan alone? Originally, they didn't think much of the people from Taoist Xianmen. However, at the Pool of Jade Blood, she and Duke Jin couldn't take down Fang Hong. Fang Hong wasn't even one of the top 10 disciples in the sect, but he was already so powerful. One could imagine the strength of Zhang Yan. Although they had already achieved Yuanying, his cultivation level was also average. He couldn't be underestimated. Furthermore, they were considered to be under that person's tutelage. Not to mention Senior Marshal Brother Lu Junyang, even if the three of them worked together, they still wouldn't be his match. It could be seen how powerful the true disciples of Qinsong School were. Those who didn't have the bloodline of a great demon wouldn't be able to compete with them. Senior Marshal Brother Jin pretended to be relaxed. He said confidently, Other than me, there's no other suitable candidate. Don't tell me we can only rely on that fool Zhao Xiong? That Zhang Yan has just achieved Yuanying. He probably has many tricks that he hasn't mastered yet. I might not be as good as him, but in terms of sneak attacks, that's my specialty. Lady Shan pondered for a moment, but she couldn't think of a better solution. Her beautiful eyes suddenly turned. And she took out a talisman from her pouch and stuffed it into Senior Marshal Brother Jin's hand, saying, "Senior Marshal Brother, this treasure was given to me by an elder of Zhenluo Union to please me. It can protect your life at a crucial moment. Senior Marshal Brother, please accept it." Senior Marshal Brother Jean didn't reject it. He took it and thanked, "After I get that fish drum, I'll definitely repay you in the future." Lady Shan secretly glanced at Zhao Xiong. Seeing that he was sleeping soundly, she moved closer and whispered, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, I don't want anything else. I heard that there's a treasure on Kuan Island, and it's in Zhang Yan's hands now. If we kill him, can Senior Marshal Brother give it to me?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean couldn't help but hesitate. He had also heard about the treasure. Since the Lai Xian sect sent over 1,000 people and 2 spiritual masters to search for it, it was definitely not an ordinary item. He also had the intention to get his hands on it. If he were to just give it to Lady Shan, he would not be willing. However, if he didn't agree, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to kill Zhang Yan. He thought to himself, "I'll agree to her first, then I'll think of another way." Therefore, he coughed and said with a smile, "What did I say? It's just a small matter, I'll agree to it." Unexpectedly, Lady Shan wasn't someone who could be coaxed easily. She pretended to be weak and put her hand on her chest, saying, "Although Senior Marshal Brother agreed to it, I'm still worried. What should I do?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean cursed in his heart. He had no choice but to make an oath. Lady Shan was relieved after hearing it, and she left with a satisfied heart. However, the two of them didn't notice that although Brother Zhao was snoring loudly, his ears were perked up and his eyes were wide open. His eyes were rolling around and there was a hint of cunning hidden in them. Lady Shan got up and flew away. Not long after, she arrived on Kuan Island. It was her first time here, and she was amazed by the wonders of creation. Just now, she circled around the flying sky continent and found a suitable place to hide. Soon after, she stood in the air and waved her long sleeves. Magnificent clouds flew out one after another. They were fragrant and flowed into the astral winds like blooming flower buds. They took the initiative to merge with the astral winds. She smiled proudly, turned her delicate body, turned into a pink light, and dove into it. This was an innate ability of hers. She could use the flower mist to hide herself. When she was invisible, even people with a higher cultivation level than her couldn't detect her. Her hiding place was only a few miles away from Turtle Snake Mountain. With her eyesight, she could see everything clearly. The night passed. When dawn broke, a golden light rose up, piercing through the strong wind and giving off a dazzling brilliance in the clouds. In the golden light, there was a Taoist in a black robe sitting on the clouds. He was breathing and cultivating qi, but because of the brilliance, his face couldn't be seen clearly. When the sun was about to set, the golden light descended and disappeared along with the setting sun. It was the same for more than 10 days. Lady Shan hid in the flower mist every day to check on Zhang Yan's movements. Now that she had figured out the time of Zhang Yan's cultivation, she left quietly and prepared to inform Senior Marshal Brother Jean. However, she did not notice that after she left, an ugly head popped out from the clouds. It stared at her back and laughed, then retracted its head back. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 449. After Lady Shan came out of Kunyu, she did not use the astral wind to escape to avoid being noticed. Instead, she rode on the clouds and returned to her previous resting place after 2 hours. Senior Marshal Brother Jean had been waiting for her news. He was meditating in a cave. When he heard that she had returned, he immediately came out of the cave and laughed. "Junior Marshal Sister Shan, you're back." Lady Shan stopped using her astral wind technique and rolled up her long sleeves. She landed in front of the cave and asked curiously, "Where's Zhao Xiong?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean shook his head. "Junior Marshal Sister Shan, don't you know him? He said that he doesn't like the food here, so he went out to hunt for wild food." When Zhao Xiong was at the mountain gate, he often did the same thing. The so-called wild food referred to bears and tigers in the mountains. Lady Shan did not take it to heart. She curled her lips and said, "It's less noisy without him. Senior Marshal Brother, I've found some information. It's not convenient to stay here. Why don't we go in and talk?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean invited Lady Shan into the cave abode. After a few words, Lady Shan told him everything that she had found out without missing anything. After listening, Senior Marshal Brother Jean praised her and said, "It's all thanks to Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Only you are capable. If it were me or Zhao Xiong, neither of us would be able to do it." Upon receiving this compliment, Lady Shan immediately smiled like a flower and said, "Senior Marshal Brother is too kind." Senior Marshal Brother Jean also smiled. Then, his expression turned serious and he said in a deep voice, "Let's not waste any more time. Let's wait for Zhao Xiong to come back and discuss it. We'll make our move in 2 days." Lady Shan stood up and bowed. "As you wish, Senior Marshal Brother." The two waited for a long time. Who would have thought that Zhao Xiong would only be seen leisurely returning to his cave residence at daybreak? As he picked his teeth, he hummed a folk song that he had heard from who knows where. His huge body made loud thumping sounds as he walked on the mountain path, like beating drums, shaking the valley and causing the birds in the forest to fly up in fright. Lady Shan frowned and was about to scold him when Senior Marshal Brother Jean waved his hand and said, "Let him be. It's good that he didn't drink." Zhao Xiong's ears were sharp and he shouted from afar, "Before we left, Senior Brother told me not to drink. How would I dare to steal a sip?" Senior Brother Jean didn't want to scold him too much, so he calmly asked him to come over. The three of them entered the cave, sat down, and discussed for a while. Then, they agreed on a time to depart. Then they went their separate ways. Senior Marshal Brother Jean sent the two away. Remembering that Hong An was still locked in the cave, he was afraid that he might have missed something, so he came over to question him again. Other than the method of leaving the formation, which Hong An intentionally hid, he answered everything else. Senior Marshal Brother Jean saw that he really couldn't get any more information out of him, so he sent a small demon to take him away. Then he meditated and adjusted his chi meridians. At midnight, he prepared his magical weapon, the talisman, and left the cave alone, stirring up a gust of demonic wind. He flew toward Kunyu. After more than 2 hours, he arrived at Kuan Island. As a precaution, he slapped a concealment talisman on his body and temporarily hid his tracks. Then he followed the method that Hong An taught him. After a few turns, he quietly snuck into the formation. As soon as he stepped in, he saw that he was in a herb garden. However, the walls and houses had collapsed, and it seemed that no one had taken care of the place. This was a herb garden in the Haoxingdao Palace. There used to be a restrictive array, but when the Shen sect came, it was destroyed. Lu Gua had been thinking about how to set up another restrictive array. She was deep in thought and didn't have time to care about this place. Otherwise, if someone came in, they would be discovered by him. Senior Marshal Brother Jean couldn't help but feel lucky. If he accidentally broke into a restrictive array, he wouldn't be afraid. However, if he attracted the attention of Zhang Yan, it would be difficult for him. Because he knew that Zhang Yan usually cultivated on the Turtle Snake Mountain, he didn't dare to get too close. Kuan Island was vast, so he found a mountain ridge far away and hid, waiting for the right time to strike. When the time came, Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong came out of the mountain. When they were outside the Turtle Snake Mountain, they hid in the strong wind and prepared to strike. For the past half a month, Zhang Yan went to the Jiutian heaven during the day and used the hero's not fish drum to absorb the green yang qi. At night, he used the broken jade to study the 5 elements escape technique. However, he didn't let his guard down and used the sword pill to guard it every day. Another night passed, and his mind came out of the broken jade. He picked up a letter of unknown origin and looked at it. After a few glances, he smiled and threw it aside. He looked at the sky and saw a golden glow in the sky. When the sun was about to rise, he waved his sleeves and flew up with the wind. He separated the strong wind and sat on the Jiutian heaven. Fang Zixing hadn't cultivated for long when he heard his sword pellet tremble and give off a clear cry that resounded through the clouds. His eyes suddenly opened and he shouted, "Who's spying on me?" A woman's laughter sounded in the clouds. Lady Shan walked out of the clouds and said, "Jinren Zhang, I've been waiting for you for a long time." As soon as she appeared, Zhao Xiong also swayed his body and walked out. He held a golden melon hammer in his hand and laughed wildly. His body, which was tens of feet tall, trembled non-stop and looked extremely ferocious. Lady Shan knew that Zhang Yan wasn't easy to deal with. Then, a pink mist rose from the cloud and a nascent soul surrounded by red light appeared. The nascent soul was holding a flower branch in its hand. It was wearing a colorful feather robe and a golden silk belt, which was fluttering in the wind. However, at this moment, Zhang Yan was calm, as if he wasn't surprised by the appearance of the two. Lady Shan saw his expression and frowned slightly. She didn't know where the uneasiness came from. Seeing that Zhao Xiong was still laughing, she was a little annoyed. She couldn't help but say with hatred, "You barbarian, if you have the strength, hurry up and attack. Why are you laughing here?" A fierce look flashed in Zhao Xiong's eyes and he said, "All right, let's do it now." He raised the golden hammer high and roared. He gathered all the strength in his body and smashed it down. It landed right on the protective light of Lady Shan's Yuaning. A loud sound was heard and half of the red light collapsed in the blink of an eye. Lady Shan didn't expect Zhao Xiong to attack her and was stunned. She said in shock and anger, "Zhao Xiong, you're crazy." However, when she met Zhao Xiong's eyes, she shivered. This person's eyes were cold and he didn't look like his usual lecherous self. As soon as she finished speaking, the second hammer strike descended once more. Bang! The protective treasure light was unable to endure it any longer, and it instantly collapsed and transformed into strands of dust that flew off into the distance. Lady Shan screamed. Just now, she panicked and wanted to escape. However, it was too late. Zhao Xiong suddenly took a deep breath, and all the strong winds within 1,000 feet gathered towards him. Lady Shan felt that her body was wrapped by the violent wind. She could only move half a step before she had no choice but to stop. She couldn't even move her limbs, and her beautiful eyes were filled with panic. Zhao Xiong was a strength path cultivator and close combat was his forte. He was only a few steps away from Lady Shan, so he wouldn't give her a chance to fight back. With a hideous smile, he raised the golden melon hammer with both hands and smashed it towards Lady Shan's head. With a crack, blood splattered and Lady Shan's head split open like a rotten melon. She died before she could make a sound. Zhao Xiong shouted again. He grabbed with his large hand and crushed the delicate body and origin spirit together. After killing Lady Shan, he threw the golden melon hammer away and knelt on the cloud. He kowtowed and said, "Little demon Zhao Xiong greets Sage Zhang." When the two of them fought, Zhang Yan had been watching coldly. Seeing him kneel down, he said, "You're the person who sent the message that day?" Zhao Xiong kowtowed repeatedly and said, "It's me, it's me." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "You said in the letter that the three of you are under that person's tutelage. Why did you come to help me?" Zhao Xiong raised his hand and hammered it. He said angrily, "Sage Zhang may not know this, but when we were under the tutelage, we were only facing a statue. We didn't even see the person's face. We only said that he was an in-name disciple. Only Duke Jin Tan and Lady Shan thought that they had climbed up a high branch, but I never took it seriously. All these years, the three of us have only been running errands. But last year, there was suddenly a talisman that could help us increase our cultivation. Now that it's urgent, I suspected that there's something fishy about it. I didn't want to do it, but I was afraid that if I refused, I would die first, so I had to agree." At this point, his face was full of worry. He said, "Little demon, I was given a life incense by Meng Iren, and it could tell my lifespan. After I got his talisman and increased my cultivation, I secretly went to check, but I found that the life incense was missing a lot. Not only that, a part of it was missing every day. If this goes on, I don't think I have many years to live. He clearly wants me to die. Since he is heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust. It's fine if a person doesn't know how long he can live because he's ignorant and fearless. But after knowing, he's even more afraid of death." Zhao Xiong looked at the life incense, and the more he looked, the more flustered he became. He knew that there's no way out under that person, so he decided to rely on Zhang Yan, hoping to have a way to survive. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and said, "Is Uncle Master Yu Gu here?" After a while, the Yu Gu true spirit walked out lazily and said, "What did you call me for, Uncle Master?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands and said, "I'm sure Uncle Master has heard what this person said just now. Does Uncle Master know what kind of talisman it is?" The Yu Gu true spirit laughed and said, "Uncle Master, you've asked the right person. This little demon isn't talking nonsense. This is a strange treasure that person took away in passing, and it's called the Bamboo of Knowing Destiny Expiation. This treasure can help 3 to 5 people to increase their cultivation in 100 years, and break through the closed door of cultivation. However, this isn't the right path, and those who use this treasure can only live for 7 to 8 years, and it's not very useful. This talisman was originally used in Qinsong school for those cultivators who couldn't break through the realm for a long time and whose lifespan was near the end. It was used to strengthen their primordial spirit before they reincarnated, and that would increase their chances of entering Tao in their next life. Zhang Yan thought for a while, and vaguely guessed the thoughts of that fierce person. Although he revealed the heroic knot fish drum, that person was obviously afraid that this was a bait set up by Sect Master Qin, but he wasn't willing to give up just like that, so he hurriedly increased the cultivation of the 3 demons, and borrowed their hands to snatch the heroic knot fish drum. It'd be best if he succeeded, but it's fine if he failed, as it'd just be the death of a few unimportant demon cultivators. Zhao Xiong understood that he only had a few years left to live, and it was shorter than he imagined. He immediately beat his chest and stomped his feet and cried, "That Master Jin Tan should be hiding down there now. This little demon is willing to be the vanguard, and smash his dog head. I only beg that you save my life." Chapter 450. Zhao Xiong was desperate. He thought that since Zhang Yan graduated from Qinsong school and was one of the top 10 disciples, he might know how to save his life. It was better than dying for no reason. Even if it did not work out, he could settle for the next best thing. He would still have a chance to reincarnate in the future. For this, he did not hesitate to cut off his own path of retreat. Although he had been drooling over Lady Shan's beauty for a long time, if he was dead, what use would it be? He volunteered to fight because he was eager to make a contribution. With this performance, even if Zhang Yan could not help him, he could at least point him in the right direction. Zhang Yan pondered for a while. After all, this demon was once a disciple of that person. Perhaps he knew some secrets. It was better to send him to Qinsong school and let the headmaster decide what to do. He said, "We will discuss this later. There is no need for you to fight Master Jin Tan. Just stand aside and watch." Zhao Xiong wanted to please Zhang Yan and did not dare to disobey. He said, "Whatever Shenren wants me to do, I will do." Master Jin Tan was hiding in Kunyu. When he first saw the strange phenomenon in the clouds and heard the noise, he knew that Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong were fighting with Zhang Yan. He quickly came out of his hiding place and sneaked to the foot of Turtle Snake Mountain. He went all the way to the peak and hid among the trees. Not long after, he saw the strong wind stirring in the sky. The clouds swirled like a whirlpool. Someone was about to fall from the sky. His heart tightened. He gripped the axe in his hands and his eyes were fierce. He was waiting for the opponent to come down and then he would attack. In the air current, a pillar of golden light fell from the sky. A handsome Taoist descended from the clouds with his sleeves fluttering. Master Jin Tan saw it clearly. He thought that the opponent should be occupied by Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong. He would not have thought that there was an ambush here. Without thinking, he leaped out and swung his axe at Zhang Yan's waist. The axe in his hand was also a heavenly weapon. When he swung it, the talisman shone. Rays of brilliant light secretly contained magical power. As long as he managed to hit his opponent, even if he didn't lose his life, he would be able to reduce his combat strength by more than half. Zhang Yan was already prepared. He glanced at him indifferently when he saw him charging at him, raised his hand, and pointed at him. All of a sudden, A thunderous roar resounded, and a bolt of purple lightning shot out from the fingertip, instantly arriving in front of him. Master Jintan's face turned pale with fright. Demon cultivators are most afraid of the power of thunder. Seeing how fast it was coming, he could not avoid it in time. He could only grit his teeth and bear the brunt of the blow. With a roar, he flipped the axe in his hand and raised it in front of him. The power of this purple lightning was incomparably domineering. A loud sound rang out like a landslide, echoing endlessly. Not only did the divine weapon in Zhao Xiong's hand disappear without a trace, even half of his shoulder and head turned into ash and flew away. The charred remains flew dozens of feet away. Then, it rolled down the mountain ridge. Although the body didn't have a head, when it reached halfway up the mountain, it stretched out a hand and grabbed onto the vines in the mountain, stopping its fall. It shook a little and a black gas came out from the wound, swaying a little. When it dissipated, the head would regenerate. Zhao Xiong stood behind Zhang Yan and watched the battle. Seeing how he had reduced Master Jintan to such a sorry state with just one finger, his heart shuddered, and his eyes were filled with fear. He hesitated for a moment, then said carefully, "Sage Zhang, this old dog Jin is the same as the little demon, he is also a strength cultivator. Now that he has reached the 4th rank, he is like a Chi Path Yuanying cultivator. As long as there is not a bit of primordial blood essence left in his body, he can regrow a broken arm or a broken leg. Even if there is only a part of his body left, he can still regrow it. Normal methods will not be able to kill him." Zhang Yan nodded. This was also the first time he saw a 4th-rank demon cultivator of the strength path. Different from the Chi path, strength path focused on refining the body, and finally, the body would be indestructible. Just like what Zhao Xiong had said, with his opponent's cultivation at this stage, if there was no way to kill him in one strike, he could only try to trap him and then find a way to kill him. Master Jintan was hit by Zhang Yan's purple lightning, and he was still in a state of shock. Knowing that he could not do anything, he did not have the time to think about the ending of Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong. He quickly shook his body and transformed into a large dog that looked like a lion or a tiger. There was a golden mane around his neck, and he looked quite majestic. He kicked with his 4 paws, turned into a black light, and flew away from the mountain. Zhang Yan saw that he was escaping, and he thought to himself, "In the future, I might meet a demon of this level. Why don't I test this demon's ability?" He formed a spell, and the stellar sword pill flew out. In a flash, it traveled a few miles and caught up with the demon dog. It slashed down and hit the demon dog's back. With a pft sound, the sword penetrated 3 inches into the demon dog's flesh. He tried to use his mana again, but it could not go any deeper. Zhang Yan noticed this, and he used the sword to drag it. The sword pill rubbed against the demon dog's bones, as if it was hitting metal. There was a clanging sound and sparks flew. Master Jintan's body shook, and he let out a long howl. He shook off the sword pill, and the wound immediately closed up. His speed of escape did not change at all. When a strength path demon cultivator reached this stage, their bones would be as hard as steel. The flying sword path, without a secret technique, would not be able to kill them. Even though Master Jintan was not afraid of the sword pill, he was extremely afraid of the purple thunderbolt that was just now. Regenerating a severed head seemed easy, but in fact, it consumed a lot of vitality. If he took a few more hits, his life would be in danger. Zhang Yan had tried it out, but when he saw that the sword orb couldn't do anything to the demon, he withdrew it and used the minor universe movement art. His figure flashed, and in an instant he caught up to the demon. He rode the wind in the sky and said, "Brother Jin, if you are willing to surrender to me, I can spare your life." Hearing this, Master Jintan hesitated for a while. However, seeing that the exit was right in front of him, and he still had a life-saving talisman that he had not used, he gritted his teeth and ran for his life. Zhang Yan smiled coldly and did not speak anymore. With a shout, Yuanying flew out of the door and stood in the air. A ray of golden light flew out from his back. It only flashed once before it circled around the field and disappeared. Master Jintan was running for his life in a hurry. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his neck, and his head slid off without a sound. His body flew forward for several yards before falling from the clouds and landing on the ground. His foreclaws twitched a few times. After a while, with a pu sound, blood spurted out from his wounds. In an instant, he stopped moving. Zhao Xiong thought that Master Jin Tan would be able to stand up again soon, but after waiting for a long time, there was no movement. He shuddered involuntarily. Only then did he realize that this demon, who had the same cultivation level as him, was already dead. He was secretly shocked. Wiping the cold sweat off his forehead, he said, "Zhenren Zhang has such skills. If you wanted to deal with me just now, wouldn't you have killed me just like that? Thank goodness, thank goodness." What Zhang Yan used just now was the metal element true light of the great mystery true light. This light had its own mysteries. When it flew out, it only needed to behead the head of the enemy's 6 sons. Then, it could kill the origin spirit as well. Even if it could regrow its limbs without the origin spirit, it would not be able to do much. After killing Master Jin Tan, Zhang Yan turned around. When he passed by Zhao Xiong, he glanced at him and said, "Come with me." This glance sent chills down Zhao Xiong's spine. Because the scene of Zhang Yan killing Master Jin Tan was too strange, he was also quite shocked. Therefore, he did not dare to breathe too loudly and followed after Master Jin Tan. The two returned to the peak of Turtle Snake Mountain. Zhang Yan sat on a rock and asked in a friendly manner, "Friend Zhao, let me ask you something. You have been cultivating in the Central Pillar State for a long time. Do you know which sect specializes in craftsmanship?" Zhao Xiong was startled. He did not know why Zhang Yan would suddenly ask about this. However, he did not dare to not answer. He patted his head and carefully answered, "I do know a thing or two. When it comes to craftsmanship, Pingdong's Jin Ling sect is the most famous. However, they have a lot of rules and are not easy to deal with. Other than that, there's also the Zhenluo Union. There are quite a number of experts in smithing. When this little demon was under that person's tutelage, the senior brothers in the sect would often go to those people to refine treasures. This little demon was fortunate enough to go there a few times." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and asked again, "Do you know their names?" Zhao Xiong patted his chest and said, "I have a good memory. I have not forgotten a single one." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "All right, tell me. Don't leave anything out." Zhao Xiong hurriedly told him the names of these people. He was afraid that it was not detailed enough, so he told him the appearance of a few people that he knew. When Zhang Yan heard this, he was shocked. There were more than 10 almighty craftsmen in the Zhenluo alliance, not to mention the 3 sects of Pingdong. In the Donghua continent, other than Butian Pavilion, it was not easy to have 2 or 3 of them in a sect. However, Zhao Xiong only knew that these people were all exceptional, but he couldn't tell who was better and who was worse. Therefore, Zhang Yan could only memorize them one by one and prepare to deal with them when he went to look for them in the future. The sword competition of the 16 sects was coming soon. Since he had the intention to go, he had to be fully prepared. Other than practicing divine arts, he also wanted to craft a few magic weapons that he could use, especially the tortoise shell that the great demon Guzongyao obtained in the past. If he could find an expert to craft it, he might be able to craft a treasure. Actually, in terms of crafting tools, Butian Pavilion, one of the 10 great sects of the Donghua continent, was the most proficient. However, in Kunyu he could borrow the hero's not fish drum to refine the Qingyang Ganjing. Zhang Yan did not want to go back for now. Moreover, the whereabouts of the disciples of this sect were uncertain, so it was difficult to find them. Since the methods of crafting tools in the Middle Pillar continent were also very brilliant, he might as well search for them on the spot. At this time, Zhao Xiong stared at Zhang Yan and stammered, "Spiritual master, this, that." Zhang Yan smiled slightly. He took out a pen and paper and wrote a letter. He handed it to Zhao Xiong and said, "I can't save you, but you can take my letter to Qinsong School to see the spiritual master. Whether or not you can escape this disaster will depend on your own luck." When Zhao Xiong first heard that Zhang Yan could not save him, he could not help but feel slightly disappointed. When he heard that he could visit the Qinsong School's master, He could not help but be overjoyed. A glimmer of hope was reignited in his heart. He quickly kneeled down to thank him and said, "Spiritual Master, I will never forget your kindness today." He did not have many years left in his life, so he did not dare to stay here any longer. After thanking him profusely, he was about to leave when Zhang Yan called out to him. He smiled and said, "Wait. Before you leave, why don't you go to Haoxing Palace and see Master Lu? If you can help him capture Hong'an, you might be able to benefit from it." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.